We're good.
Call this meeting to order. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land of which we gather is a traditional territory for the Anishinaabe, Ottawa, and Mississauga peoples. Thank you. Confirmation of the agenda. The Council Township of North Huron hereby accepts the agenda for June 21st, 2021 council meeting as presented. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin moving and I have Anita seconding. Carson?
Thank you, Your Worship. So Deputy Reeve site. Councillor Falconer. Councillor Heffer.
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson.
Yes.
Councillor Palmer.
Yes.
Councillor McBurney.
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Go ahead, Deputy Reeve Sites.
Yes, thank you, Reeve. I just wanted to acknowledge that in the bills of accounts, check number 506791 is written to my spouse, Tiffany Sipe. These are for expenses, I believe, for the daycare. However, with that being said, I am going to declare conflict and not vote on the bills of accounts.
Thank you kindly. Public comments. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to any item of business that is on the agenda. 2 minutes per person. Is there anyone out there that would like to speak on any item? I am not hearing anybody call out. So we will move on. Consent agenda that the Council Township of North Huron hereby adopts consent agenda 5.1.1. And further that the Council Township of North Huron hereby receives consent items 5.1.2 to 5.3.10 for information. Do I have a mover? I have Paul moving. Do I have a seconder? I have Rick seconding. Again, I'm going to hand it over to you, Carson.
Oh, comments.
Oh, sorry. Would anybody like to pull anything out? Let's start with Chris. Yep, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. Yeah, this is 5.2.5. I was delighted to read in the report that it doesn't show that our taxpayers have to help subsidize child services in any way, because it basically pays for itself. I was happy that. But I was wondering, or curious, it's a report. It's a staff report because of one of our counselors asks. And I was wondering why it was here and not a separate line item that could be for further discussion, say.
So
To that
I can speak to that, Your Worship. So we put it on the agenda because as you'll know, note in the report, the recommendation is just to receive it for information. But as council is aware, and you can pull anything from the consent agenda for further discussion if it's warranted.
Thank you. Anyone else? I just want to point out on that subject, Chris, if you look at it, when you say the daycare center actually lost money. The reason for that report being there was a misunderstanding of whether the daycare broke even, made money, or lost money. So it clearly shows that the before and after program, and I forget the name of the other program, it took the money that we actually made from those two activities that are not the daycare center, put towards the daycare center, and then therefore the daycare center actually broke even. But it would have lost money if we weren't doing those. And those two other ones that we do, just so everybody understands, anybody could get a hold of the county and they could say, we want to put their, just decide to do it themselves. They can make up those programs and they could take that business from us. So just that's why that was put there, to show that the daycare does not break even, that it took the profits from the other two groups to make it break even. Okay.
I guess I look at the package deal.
Okay, kiddo. Anybody else? Trevor, go ahead.
I just want to mention that this report was really the true reason for this report was only to be talking about the revenue side. That was the request of understanding what the revenues was. The expenses obviously was put in there, but really the conversation was to talk about where the revenue comes from as it relates to daycare services. That was the intent of the report.
Okay, we got that all straightened out. Okay, I've got a mover and a seconder, I do believe. So if there's no other questions, I'm going to hand it over to you, Carson.
Councillor Palmer has his hand up, Your Worship.
I
I
apologize.
was muted. Sorry, Reeve. I have one more
Yep, go ahead.
question, and it's 534. It's regarding the capital gains resolution by the Fort Erie Council. I'd like it if we could send a letter to Prime Minister Trudeau and Premier Doug Ford supporting the Fort Erie resolution.
You're going to move that. Do we have a seconder?
So you already have a motion on the floor, Your Worship. So if the mover and the seconder are okay with it, we'll pull 5.3.4 from this motion, and then we'll pass a separate motion.
Okay, thank you. We okay with that?
Your mover is Councillor Heffer, and your seconder is Councillor McBurney.
And I see them, Mr. McBurney, you okay with that? Yep, they're both nodding. Okay, so we'll finish this one off. I'll hand it over to you, Carson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So your first motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby adopts consent item 5.1.1, and further that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives consent items 5.1.2 to 5.3.10, exclusive of 5.3.4 for information. So Councillor Falconer?
Yes.
Councillor Heffer? Councillor Van Hitterson?
Yes.
Councillor Palmer?
Yes.
Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
And Deputy Reeve Sipes declared a conflict of interest on this agenda item. So then Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 6-0. So your second motion would be that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby directs staff to send a letter of support for the Township of Scugog's resolution regarding capital gains tax on primary residence to the Prime Minister of Canada and the Premier of Ontario.
And I
So you
believe
have
we had a
Councillor Palmer as your mover, and you're looking for a seconder.
seconder, please. Paul, it was you, I believe. Paul Heffer.
Yep.
You kindly, and when you're ready, Carson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sipe,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes,
So that motion carries 7-0.
thank you. Public meetings and hearings and delegations, 6.1. Before I start, there's a reason that Mayor Bernie McCullen is with us. He's going to represent the county on this item today. So he can speak if he likes, or he can just watch and listen. So we have a joint 6.1. We have a joint public meeting for draft plan of subdivision 40T21002 and zoning bylaw amendment Z03-2021 Rutledge Holdings Limited. Location Block 3, Registered Plan 22M-13, Blythe Township of North Huron. Applicant owner is Ron Davison, Land Use Planning Consultant, Inc. for Rutledge Holding Limited. Purpose of the public meeting. The purpose of the joint public meeting of the Township of North Huron and the County of Huron is to consider and obtain public comments on the proposed plan of subdivision under Section 51 of the Planning Act and the proposed zoning bylaw amendment under Section 34 of the Planning Act. I'm going to now hand it over to Monica if she's ready.
Yes. Thank you
Good.
very much, Reeve Bailey. Good evening, Council. This is an application for plan of subdivision and an application for zoning bylaw amendment. As the Reeve has stated, tonight is a public meeting, and that's being held jointly between the County of Huron and the Township of North Huron. I have a PowerPoint presentation that will take us through the basics of both applications. And the agent for the applicant, Ron Davidson, I believe is on the line as well, and he may wish to add to my comments. The file number for the plan of subdivision is 40T21002. And this is an application for plan of subdivision to divide block 3 in plan 22M13 in Blythe. The plan of subdivision I'll describe in a moment, but it's for residential purposes in an area designated residential adjacent to existing residential development in the north end of Blythe. The owner of the property is Rutling Holdings Limited. So this is an air photo from WebGIS. The WebGIS air photos were flown in 2015, and this was before the existing plan of subdivision was built out. So the land in this area looks quite different today, and I'll be able to show you that in some photos that I took on site. But Rutledge Street that you can see on this map is developed, and this little gap right here is showing the location of Gloria Street, which comes up from the south. The proposed plan of subdivision, now this plan is oriented a little differently. North is to the right-hand side of this drawing. So Rutledge Street that runs east-west towards Highway 4 is here, and Gloria Street, which runs north-south, is along the bottom of this map. So we're changing orientation from the previous slide. So just remember Highway 4 is at the top and north is at the side here. So the proposal for this plan of subdivision is to create low density residential lots in the location where my arrow is pointing here, total of 5 lots in this location, and 1 high density residential lot for a 6-unit townhouse development. In order to provide access to the proposed lots, Gloria Street is proposed to be extended, so further north. And the small little blocks that you see at the end here are to allow a turning circle, because this is a dead end street. So snow plows and other equipment will need to be able to turn around at the end of the street. So a portion of the private land will have an easement on it in order to allow the turnaround of vehicles. The benefit of this application is that it takes a lot that was proposed for an apartment building and divides it into more easily developed residential lots. We know that there is a demand for residential in this area because the existing subdivision has built out fairly rapidly. And we know that low density residential as well as townhomes are both very popular forms of development right now. Originally, the applicant had envisioned that this area would be developed for a senior's retirement home, but due to some of the barriers to that type of a business being developed at this time because of COVID and due to the high demand for these other forms of development, the owner of the land decided to go in a different direction, and that's why we have the proposal that's before us tonight. Nice thing about this development is that there still is a high density residential component. So that helps to meet the county's goals for a mix of low, medium, and high density residential in P1 and P2 residential areas. When I say P1 and P2, I mean primary and primary 1 and primary 2 settlement areas where the majority of our new residential development is meant to be directed to. So that's a long way of just saying that this development helps the county meet its goals for a mix of residential types. The next slide just shows the proposed zone changes. So right now the land is zoned R3, high density residential. The proposal is to zone the lands on the west side of Gloria Street to residential low density for single detached lots. The lots on the east side of Gloria Street for a 6-unit townhouse development. Both zones have some minor adjustments to the provisions of the zoning bylaw to facilitate the proposed development, reduce rear and side yard setbacks, and in the R3 zone, a reduced lot depth requirement. So that's summarized in the next slide. So the subject land is about 2 acres in area. It has access from Rutledge Street and Gloria Street. An extension to Gloria Street is proposed. The plan of subdivision proposes 5 low-density residential lots and 1 high-density residential block for a 6-unit townhouse building. In reviewing this application, we have not received any objections from agencies or neighbors. However, comments may arise at the public meeting. Thought I had a slide that summarized the zoning, so I apologize that I didn't grab that. In the zoning changes, I will just maybe leave that presentation for a moment and just refer to my report. Just bear with me for 1 second. I want to highlight the zone change and the variances that are included in that. So the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone a portion of the subject lands to residential low density zones and rezone the other portion to high density special zones. The proposed special zone provisions for the R1 reduce the minimum rear yard requirement from 8 meters to 6 meters. And the proposed special zone provisions for the R3 special zone reduce the exterior side yard requirement from 6 meters to 4 meters, reduce the minimum rear yard requirement from 10 meters to 8 meters, and reduce the minimum lot depth requirement from 38 meters to 32.3 meters. In considering these variances from the requirements of the zoning bylaw, the planning department considered the policies of the Township of North Huron official plan, and it is the opinion of planning and development that these changes to the provisions to allow the special zoning for this lot is a benefit because it allows development that is similar in size and scale to the surrounding neighborhood, and it will fit in with the character of the surrounding neighborhood. And the variances that are proposed are not major change from the existing zone provisions. Let me just think here. I just want to bring that that presentation up one more time. Again. Here it is. Share that. Go back to where I left off there before I went and referred to my report. So, as I said, there were no comments of objection. The last few slides here, I just wanted to show you some photos from my site visit. So as you can see, this is where block 3 is in the previous subdivision, and it's located right at the current corner of Gloria and Rutledge, and Gloria will be extended north from where the camera is facing it in this photo. The planning department's recommendation is that the application for subdivision be recommended for approval with the recommended conditions. So at this stage, the Township of North Huron is being asked to provide a recommendation to the decision maker, which is Huron County. And we're also recommending that the bylaw amendment be approved. So those would be my comments for now, and I'm available if there are any questions.
Thank you, Monica. 6.1.3 is your opportunity to comment on application by applicant and or their agent. Is there anyone out there that would like to speak to this?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead, my friend.
Yeah, my name is. Oh, I'm getting a lot of feedback here. Can you guys hear that?
Yes, Ron, we hear that.
I'm not sure
We
what
might
to do.
have more than one window open. That might be the reason for the feedback.
Okay. Cross. Damn. Can you hear me?
Unfortunately, Ron, you've got quite an echo there.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to dial back in. Can you hear me now?
Still echoed.
Just hold on 1 second, Ron. I see 2 of you in the meeting, so I'm going to try and remove the one that's
Thank you.
try and remove the one right now and see if that works. Okay, now if you want to try.
Okay, is that better?
That's great, Ron. Thank you.
Yeah,
Go
sorry
ahead.
about that. I got booted out earlier and then I dialed back in and obviously I didn't know what I was doing. So good evening. My name is Ron Davidson. I am a planning consultant and I shall keep this very brief. With us on the line tonight is Gary Rutledge. He's the owner, obviously, and Steve McMillan. Steve is the engineer that's helped design the subdivision and did a lot of the background work. And he works for GM Blue Plan. I did a planning report that went along with the application, but I'm not going to get into that at all tonight. This is very simple, as you've heard Monica explain. Maybe she didn't use those words, but it's a subdivision within a subdivision. Back in 2017, Gary got a subdivision approved for a larger parcel of land, and there's this one remaining block that he had every intention of putting a retirement home on, because that's what he does for a living. But as you heard Monica state, and she heard that from Gary, he is no longer interested in putting a retirement home on that property, just with all the fallout through COVID. So he wants to go with Plan B. And as you can see, there's 5 townhouses and or I'm sorry, 6 townhouses and 5 detached dwellings in a very small road. I'm going to suggest that this might be the smallest subdivision you'll see in a long, long time. But nevertheless, it is necessary to go through this process. That's really all I have to say. I don't think anybody else, Gary or Steve, will speak unless there are questions to be asked. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ron. So we're going to move on to 6.1.4, opportunity to comment from others in attendance. Is there anyone else who would like to speak out about this? I'm not told there is, so we'll move on to 6.1.5, opportunity for question comments from council members. Council, is there any questions or comments? Go ahead,
I have one.
Paul first.
Yes, thank you, Reeve. Yeah, for the cul-de-sac at the north end of the road there, it can go into the 6-plex, no problem, to make a little bit bigger turnaround, I take it, right? To Monica, sorry.
Yes, through the Reeve. If you'd like, I can bring that slide up again, but I think we can all picture the cul-de-sac that Councillor Heffer is describing. And yes, there has been some further comments from engineering that might make some adjustments to that initial drawing that was submitted. And those details would be worked out through the subdivision agreement and through the final subdivision plan. But the basic idea is that some area from adjacent lots could be used through an easement to provide room for a turnaround. In the future, if the road were ever extended further north to further developed lands that are in North Huron to the north, that turnaround could be going back with the residential properties there, and the road would no longer have that bulb on the end. It would be a through road in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Reeve Bailey. Yeah, I endorse the changes that they're making, but I must say that I'm kind of disappointed in the fact that it would have been a well received, and it's much anticipated that there was going to be a retirement home in town. I just know a lot of people that were downsizing and moving into the fourplexes. We're looking forward to having somewhere else to go once those homes were no longer habitable, or they got a little further along in their age. But yeah, unfortunately, we could use more long-term care, as we're an aging population, and as I said, we were quite looking forward to having one in our close vicinity. So, but I can understand why they're doing this, and I do support it. But I just hope another one comes along Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputy Reeve Site?
Yeah, I guess my question is for, Monica or one of the consultant, on the section of 5 and 6, or at least on the report that I'm reading, are those expected to be single detached? Like, seem to be fairly significant lots for one. I guess I'm not sure if that's, because I'm not sure how they would get to that if there was more than one house on that lot, because of the way the other three in front that are going on to Rutledge Street and Gloria. So I just wanted to know, is the anticipation to be 5 and 6, those parcels just to be single detached homes? Is that the intention?
Through you, Reeve Bailey, yes, the intent of this developer is to develop lots 5 and 6 for single detached. The Township of North Huron zoning bylaw would allow a semi-detached or a duplex in the R1 zone. So the zoning would leave the developer open to that type of an arrangement. But my understanding is that the intent is single detached in that location.
Okay, any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Reeve. I guess to you, Monica, and to the developer, that sixplex, and I'm thinking about Councillor Faulkner, his comment, some people maybe don't want. I was wondering about varying sizes. It says nothing about the square footage of those units, individual units. And I was just wondering if there's anything maybe perhaps smaller that those folks that would have liked to have gone into a retirement home with a small footprint would feel good in a plex.
Through the Reeve, I would maybe suggest that would be a good question to be answered by Mr. Rutledge if he can. Like, the question would maybe be, is there planning to be variation in the number of bedrooms offered in the 6-unit building, or would they all be the same size?
Hi, good evening, everyone. So the intention of those 6 units would be for sale. They would not be rental units, and
okay.
they would have basements in them also. So they would be similar square footage to the existing townhomes that are there, but with walkout basements. And just to clarify things in the retirement home, I'm sure you can all appreciate it's been a very stressful time for us in the industry. And one of the things that's happened is, and I'm not getting any feedback. First of all, it's a retirement home and isn't long-term care beds. These are retirement home beds. And I'm not getting any feedback personally from the tenants that are in there about, it's never been mentioned to me personally about them looking for a retirement home in that development. So I'm not getting that feedback. But still, I can understand your concern, but unfortunately, it's just due to the COVID situation. So I do apologize for it. I was hopeful that would happen, but again, these 6 units would be for sale, and they would be similar in size, footprint wise, but they would have full basements in them compared to the existing townhomes that are there.
Thank you very much, Gary. Okay. Is there anyone else like Bernie? Bernie McCullen, would you like to speak? This is your opportunity if you'd like to speak up, Bernie.
No, as the county representative, my job is just to listen and only report back to county council if they have questions about any issue that may arise from the meeting. But no, I'm only here to observe.
I want to get a job like that. Okay, thank you very kindly. Is there anyone else? Not seeing any. 6.1.6 is summary of comments and recommendation from the Huron County Planning Development Department. And Monica, we're going to hand it over the decision of the. Go ahead, Monica.
Certainly. I'm just maybe going to open up a report on my desktop here. I don't think you can see what I'm looking at here, but it's my report that's part of council's package I'm just referring to here. So because this is a plan of subdivision, this will be implemented through a subdivision agreement with the township. And it's the planning department's recommendation that the application for plan of subdivision be approved with the conditions as recommended in my planner's report. So just at a quick high-level summary, those recommendations include issues such as roads, zoning, servicing, stormwater management, parkland and landscaping, provision of Canada Post mailboxes, that the owner and developer enter into an agreement with the township. And let me just scroll down to my report and get the last few things here. And any fees that shall be paid to the Township of North Huron. So those recommended conditions are outlined in the package that you received. So it would be the Planning and Development Department's recommendation that the application for subdivision be recommended to the County of Huron for approval with the recommended conditions. And further, that we would recommend that the application for zoning bylaw amendment, including the special provisions and special zones to recognize reduced lot depth, reduced rear yard, reduced side yard setbacks, also be passed and passed tonight by the township. So those are my two recommendations.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Billy, it's Kevin Faulkner. I just had a quick thought that came to mind when you were saying about this being a separate subdivision and agreement. Is that the intent for it to be excluded from the rest of the subdivision and be its own an entity? And is that for the purpose of reselling it for someone else to develop, or is this going to be developed by the current subdivision by Rutledge Corporation?
Through the Reeve. No, the only reason that it's coming through as a separate plan of subdivision is just the mechanics under the Planning Act that require us to do it this way. It will be a separate subdivision and there will be a separate agreement, but it has nothing to do with making it easier to sell this part of the project off or anything. And my understanding is it is the current developer's plan to also develop this portion.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. We have 3 motions to make. That's 6.1.7. First motion be it the Council of Township of North Huron hereby approves the zoning bylaw amendment file number Z03-2021 as it applies to Block 3 Registered Plan 22M-13 Blythe, Township of North Huron, County of Huron. Do I have a mover? I have Trevor Seitz moving. I have Rick McBurney seconding. Arson?
Thank you, Your Worship. So Councillor Van Hitterson,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Okay, the second motion is going to be for the chart, and Monica, I'm going to ask you to fill in the chart for us.
Certainly. I will just bring up my presentation one last time so I can show you the chart. Just one sec. So in reviewing this application, no public comments were received on this application. So 2A would be my recommendation for public comments. And for the effective agency comments, supportive comments were received. So that would be 3B. Agency comments were received in support of the application, the effect of which resulted in the decision to approve the application. So 2A and 3B.
Thank you very kindly. No. Do I have a mover? I have again, Trevor Sites moving, Paul Hepper seconding. And when you're ready, Carson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion on the floor is that for zoning bylaw amendment file Z03-2021, as it applies to Block 3 Registered Plan 22M13, Blythe, Township of North Huron, County of Huron. No public comments were received on this application, so there was no effect on the decision, and agency comments were received in support of this application, the effect of which resulted in a decision to approve the application. So Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight, Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
And the final motion is for that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby supports the proposed plan of subdivision file number 40T21002. Applicant owner Ron Davison, Land Use Planning Consultant, Inc., Rutling Holding Limited. Location Block 3, Register Plan 22M-13, Blythe Township of North Huron, with the recommended conditions set out on the Huron County Planning and Development Report presented by Monica Walker Bolton on the June 21st, 2021 council meeting. And further, that the clerk be directed to forward the resolution and documentation required under section 6-3 of regulation 544-06 of the Planning Act to the Huron County Planning and Development Department for consideration and by approval for approval authority. Do I have a mover? I have Rick moving. I have Anita seconding. When you're ready, Carson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes,
So that motion carries 7-0.
thank you. Hey, Gary, you still there? Okay, it's okay. I'll talk.
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Gary, just a
Yes.
quick personal one. Point Clark, did you used to own a house, a cottage on Seneca Street?
Yes, I did.
I'm the guy that bought it.
Oh,
What a small world, eh?
yeah, it is. I hope
Okay,
you're
cool.
enjoying it.
Yep. Thanks a lot.
All right. Take care. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to move to reports now. Clerk's Department, CL-2021-17, Community Improvement Plan, Commercial Facade Improvement Grant Application, 355 Josephine Street. I'm going to hand this over to Carson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So not much more to add beyond what was in the report, but ultimately for the benefit of the public, the township has received a commercial facade improvement grant application under the North Huron Community Improvement Plan for 355 Josephine Street in Wingham. So that is the location currently of the former coffee culture, which will be opening Sunnyside Grill in the upcoming months, as well as Pizza Hut and Circle K. So the work proposed by the applicant is noted in the report, and the applicant has provided the rationale behind the improvements. And so the work proposed certainly meets the grant eligibility criteria in regard to repair and replacement of the storefront, including repair and replacement of doors and windows, as well as restoration or replacement of building signage in accordance with the municipal sign bylaw to a maximum of 50% of the total grant amount. So the application was received on June 9th, and the Economic Development and Recovery Committee reviewed the application on June 17th and passed a motion of support for the application to be approved for the maximum amount under the grant application, which is $10,000. So as for a financial impact, there was $40,000 in the North Huron Economic Development budget for community improvement plan grant programs. This is the first application received this year. So if council is accepting of the recommendation to award the grant in the amount of $10,000, that will leave still $30,000 in the 2021 budget for community improvement plan grant programs.
Okay, thank
So
you. I'm going to read
that's
them.
all, your worship. And I guess if there's any questions of myself, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yep, so I'm going to read the motion, get a mover and seconder, and then we'll have that conversation. That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report from the clerk dated June 21st, 2021 regarding the commercial facade improvement grant application received under North Huron's Community Improvement Plan for 355 Josephine Street, Wingham. And further, that the council hereby approves the commercial facade improvement grant application for 355 Josephine Street, Wingham to be a maximum of $10,000. And further, that the clerk be directed to prepare and execute an agreement between the Township of North Huron and the applicant, which outlines the terms and conditions of the grant program. Do I have a mover? I have Paul Heffer moving. I have Kevin Faulkner seconding. Okay, I'm going to open it up for questions and comments, concerns. I am not seeing any. Carson, it's your turn.
Thank you, your worship. So Deputy Reeve Sipe,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes,
So that motion carries 7-0.
thank you. 7.1.2 is CL 2021-18 Council Composition Review and Evaluation Method of Selecting a Deputy Reeve. On this, before Carson speaks to this, on this report, there's a lot of information. Tonight, we only want to discuss the Deputy Reeve and how the Deputy Reeve is voted in. Another night, we will discuss the rest of it. So I just want to make sure that we don't get off into a 2-hour conversation on something we're going to spend 2 hours on down the road. And the reason that is, depending on what we decide with the Deputy Reeve, will send us in a direction for the next part of the conversation about council composition. So Carson, I am going to hand it over to you now, and then I'll read the bylaw after you speak. Or did I already read it?
Nope. No, I'm just going to share my screen. So is all of council able to see the slideshow in full screen there?
No. None
No?
else.
Nothing. How about now?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So as Reeve Bailey indicated, there's certainly a lot of information here. This presentation aligns with the information in the staff report, but in order to make it a little easier to digest, the background behind this request, as council is aware, in the 2020 to 2023 strategic plan, the township that was adopted by council, there was an action item in there to evaluate the current size and structure of council. In the strategic plan, it indicated that the intended outcome is to ensure that council is both the right size and structure, and the action item completion date is 2021, which is why this report is being brought forward. So this report is basically to provide council with the information necessary to allow you guys to make a decision on what you believe is the appropriate size and structure of council for North Huron. So a bit of legislative framework. There's provisions in the Municipal Act which allow a municipality to alter its composition of council, and this is done by local initiative and subject to certain rules. This authority gives council the ability to change the size of council, members' titles, as well as the methods of election and selection of members. So for example, a ward system versus an at-large system. And for changes to be in effect for the 2022 municipal election, bylaws must be passed before January 1st in the year of the regular election. So in other words, council will need to determine what that composition looks like by the end of 2021. So the legislative rules that I was referring to are found in section 217 of the Municipal Act. And so basically there's 5 criteria which governs what local municipalities can do for a council composition. So the first one there, and probably the most important, there should be a minimum of 5 members of council, one of whom shall be the head of council. So at a minimum, you are required by legislation to have at least 5 council members. Second point there, members of council are required to be appointed or elected in accordance with the Municipal Elections Act. The third one, the head of council shall be elected by general vote. So by general vote, I mean at large, where all constituents in the municipality are voting for that position. The fourth one, the members other than the head of council can be elected by general vote or wards or by any combination of general vote or wards. And finally, the representation of a local municipality on council of an upper tier municipality shall not be affected by the bylaw of a local municipality. So just a couple other legislative considerations. So to pass a bylaw that establishes the size of council, there's no appeal mechanism. But to pass a bylaw establishing new wards or dissolving of existing wards, that may be subject to an appeal through the local planning appeal tribunal. So for example, if council was to alter their ward boundaries for some reason, that could be appealed to the local planning appeal tribunal. So as Reeve mentioned, there's certainly a significant amount of information that was included in the report, and that will be included with this presentation. So to allow for a targeted discussion and decision-making, basically what I've done is I've broken this down into 4 layers of decisions that council needs to make. And I've summarized them kind of as follows. So the first one is the selection method for the position of Deputy Reeve, which as Reeve Bailey indicated is the focus of today. The second one is the size of council. The third one is whether to retain a ward system or dissolve the wards in favor of electing all council members by a general vote. And then the fourth decision that is required to be made is conditional. And so if the ward system is to be retained, then council needs to determine whether that composition is a combination of general vote or wards. But if council in decision 3 decided to dissolve of the wards, then obviously this fourth decision is not necessary. So the first one, the selection of the Deputy Reeve, will be the focus of tonight. And then for the July 5th meeting, we'll bring further back the information again for a further discussion on the size of council and whether to retain or dissolve the wards, and if the wards are to be retained, on what that looks like for council as a composition. So decision 1, method of selection for the Deputy Reeve. So the Municipal Act is virtually silent on the role of the deputy. However, in section 242 of the Act, it does state that a municipality can appoint a member to act in place of the head of council in the event the head is absent, refuses to act, or the office is vacant. So basically, to simplify matters, the deputy is essentially the alternate head of council, and any and all duties and responsibilities of the deputy outside of serving as the alternate head of council are subject to local circumstance, so at the discretion of the local council. So in selecting a Deputy Reeve, there's essentially 2 options to do so. The first option is the position is directly filled through the election process. So in this case, the Deputy Reeve position would be a position on the ballot that can be specifically voted for by constituents. And with this process, it enables eligible electors to seek the position if they want to run specifically for the Deputy Reeve, but it also allows eligible voters to cast their vote for their preferred deputy. So the second option is that the Deputy Reeve selection is the prerogative of council, and the only eligible candidates are those who have already been elected as members of council. So in these cases, the Deputy Reeve is a member of council, but they've also performed their duties as a councillor. And so as council is aware, this is the current approach used by North Huron, where the Deputy Reeve is selected by council from within council at the inaugural meeting. So for some comparators in regard to the selection of the Deputy Reeve, in 2018, there were 6 out of 9 municipalities in Huron County that elected their deputies in an at-large vote where the position was specifically on the ballot. And there was 3 exceptions to this: North Huron, Morris Turnberry, and Huron East. However, with this, I just want to note that Morris Turnberry might be better classified in the at-large grouping because they don't have a ward system, and all positions were elected at large anyways. So they are probably better classified in the at-large grouping, which leaves North Huron and Huron East as the only 2 municipalities in Huron County where the deputy is selected from within council and by council using a ward system. So the role of the deputy reeve in North Huron, attached to my staff report, was a position description that was developed for the deputy reeve. And what you'll note is that the deputy reeve position is primarily to fulfill the duties of the reeve in the absence of the reeve. And so that is why I attached the position description of the reeve as well. However, it's just important to note that this was not included in the position description, but the deputy reeve also serves on the Emergency Operations Control Group for North Huron under our emergency management plan. And this has, of course, been an increasingly demanding and vital function due to the current COVID-19 pandemic. So just some other considerations after looking at the data and the North Huron context. In practice, the deputy reeve position is quite demanding. For example, the deputy reeve participates in pre-council meetings, attends EOC meetings, acts as the alternate rep to county council, represents the township at a number of functions within the municipality, serves as the chair of council and committee meetings on an as-needed basis, and as well assists the reeve position in the execution of those duties and responsibilities. The second point there, under the North Huron Remuneration and Expenses Bylaw, the deputy reeve position has its own honorarium that is both different and slightly higher than the councillor honorarium. And the third one, North Huron could be considered an outlier in the method of selection for the deputy reeve or the deputy position in comparison to the Huron County municipalities. As I mentioned previously, North Huron is just one of 2 municipalities where the deputy is selected by council from within council through the ward system, where all others have some component of an at-large process built in for their selection of the deputy reeve. So the staff recommendation in regard to this decision is that the recommendation is that council should adopt a council composition that allows for the deputy reeve to be elected at large. With the honorarium being more than a councillor, it's clearly recognized that the position is more demanding within the North Huron context. And ultimately, the office of the deputy reeve should be filled by direct election so that any eligible elector can seek the position through the ballot, and also so that any eligible voter possesses the right to cast their vote for their preferred candidate. And by doing so, this results in future elections being more directly representative of the preferences of the electorate, and this is certainly an important point. To kind of reiterate that point, oddly enough, there's the recent example of the municipality of Kincardine, where their deputy is selected by council from within council using a ward system. So of course, their head of council resigned, and their deputy was acting as the head of council, but there was a push from members of the public for a by-election because that individual was never voted into the head of council position. And oddly enough, that individual was never voted for at all because the position was a ward councillor position that was acclaimed. So this individual went from being acclaimed as a ward councillor to making their way to the acting reeve of the municipality. So certainly something to consider as well, as with a move to an at-large deputy reeve position certainly negates that problem. So decision number 2, as I mentioned, is the size of council, but this will be brought back on July 5th for further discussion. But the data and information I'll present today to give council kind of some time to think on it, digest it, and then we'll bring it back for discussion at our next meeting. So some legislation in regard to council size, as I mentioned, there is the requirement that you have to have a minimum council size of 5, and one of those needs to be the head of council appointed by a general or elected by a general vote. There's no reference to an appropriate size of council, and there's no clear principles or formula established by the province that says this is the size of council that is appropriate for your municipality. The one thing I do want to note, though, is that most municipalities do have an odd number of council members, and this is certainly important in order to avoid confusion with tie votes. And so as staff, we're certainly desirous of whatever council wants to do with the size of council, that it should be a odd number of members in order to create ease and simplicity for council, staff, and the public. So council sizes across Southwestern Ontario. So attached to the staff report was a council composition comparators chart. And so this data was obtained in order to allow North Huron to compare themselves to 40 other municipalities. And so the selection criteria that was used in this comparator chart is any municipality within the Western region. So these are municipalities in the Western region as defined by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing that have a population between 2,000 and 8,000 people. So the reason for this is this allows council to compare to similar municipalities in regard to both population size and also in terms of geography by being in close proximity to North Huron. And North Huron is almost directly in the middle of these comparators with a population of 4,932. So after looking at the data, some council size considerations, there was slightly over half of the 40 municipalities that currently have a council size of 5. And when comparing North Huron to other municipalities with a population below 5,000 residents, there's just one other municipality that has a council size of larger than 5. And so that is, I believe it was the municipality of Perth South. And so all 17 of those other comparator municipalities with a population of 5,000 or less have a current council size of 5 members. Once you get above that 5,000 resident threshold, there's a little less consistency. Certainly the majority of those municipalities had a council size of either 7 or 5, with 2 municipalities reporting a council of 8 and 1 reporting a council of 9. And then for council's benefit, I also conducted a council member to population ratio in order to allow North Huron to compare to the average of how many councillors per members into the population. So once that ratio is run, North Huron has a ratio of 704 residents per member of council, and in comparison, the average is 882 residents per member of council. So just some staff comments after digesting that data. Again, a discussion on council size will be brought forward on July 5th. Secondly, council, when looking at the data, council may find it prudent to adopt a size of 5 to align with the majority of comparator municipalities in Southwestern Ontario, and particularly with those of a population of 5,000 or less. The third one, the data gathered certainly doesn't suggest that if council was not to reduce to 5, that more than 7 should be pursued, as there are no municipalities of less than 5,000 with more than 7 members. And then, as I noted previously, a change in the size of council is not subject to an appeal to the local planning appeal tribunal. So decision 3, whether to retain or dissolve the ward system. And as I mentioned previously, this will be brought back on July 5th for further discussion. So some legislation pertaining to this decision. Again, Section 222 of the Municipal Act authorizes a municipality to divide or redivide the municipality into wards, or to dissolve those existing wards, and that needs to be done by bylaw. But again, there are no references to the appropriate electoral system or any constraints in place that would require a municipality to adopt one electoral system over another. So electoral system structures across Southwestern Ontario. So attached to that council comparators chart that I referenced previously, there was a column in that chart that referred to structure. And so this structure column allows North Huron to compare to those 40 other municipalities of a similar geographic nature and population size. And so in that chart, I classified all those municipalities by either at-large or wards. So at-large refers to any municipality where the electoral system within electoral system where all council member positions are elected by general vote, so where all positions are at large. And the second classification, wards, refers to any municipality where there is at least one ward position built into the electoral system. So municipalities that have a ward classification may also have council member positions that are elected by general vote. And so the important thing, I just want to note with that column, the data is based on the electoral system structure that was used for the 2018 municipal election. So the chart certainly doesn't take into account municipalities that have changed their electoral system structure in advance of the 2022 election. So for example, Asheville-Colbert-Wawanosh is noted in the chart as being part of the wards classification, but since that time they have eliminated their wards and have moved to an at-large classification. So just some considerations when looking at that data. 65% of the comparator municipalities, so in other words, 26 out of those 40 municipalities have an electoral system where all council members are elected at large. And in comparing again to the 5,000 and less threshold, only 4 municipalities other than North Huron have a ward system in place, and the 14 other municipalities with 5,000 or less residents are all elected at large. So just some staff comments on this. Again, this will be brought back on July 5th for the discussion. Secondly, council may wish to adopt an electoral system structure where all council members are elected at large to align with those majority of municipalities in Southwestern Ontario. And again, specifically more so with those majority of municipalities of 5,000 or less. Importantly, at this time, only street lighting and policing are area rated. As council's aware, the provincial government will soon be eliminating policing contracts. So once this occurs, there will be minimal difference between the 3 wards of North Huron in regard to level of services. And finally, as I noted previously, a bylaw establishing new ward boundaries or altering existing ward boundaries dissolving of existing ward boundaries may be subject to an LPAT appeal. So then the final decision is to determine whether the composition will be a combination of both general vote and wards. And again, this condition is only necessary if council opts to retain the ward system. So if council wants to retain your ward system, you need to make a determination of what that looks like and how many positions are ward councilor positions. So in regard to, so as I mentioned, only necessary if council opts to retain the ward system. If council opts to dissolve the ward system, this decision is no longer required. In regard to the legislation, as I noted in one of the beginning slides, other than the head of council, members shall be elected by general vote or wards or by any combination of general vote or wards. So just some staff comments on this. Of course, the available options for council will be contingent on the other decisions you make, right? So the options available for a council composition in regard to a partial ward, partial at-large system, of course, is dependent on your method of selection for the deputy reeve and your preferred size of council. So once you make those decisions, that's going to provide some clarity of what options are certainly available to you. At this time, staff are seeking just direction on the method of seeking direction on the selection method for the deputy reeve. And the last point there, I think, is an important one. If council is to retain the ward system, the present ward configuration is familiar to residents, and we as staff would certainly not recommend establishing different ward boundaries without having a third-party consultant undertake a ward boundary review. As we certainly wouldn't want to deviate from what is, if you were going to keep a ward system, we wouldn't want to deviate from what is familiar without bringing an external party in for further research. So in regard to the financial impact, there's only a financial impact to be experienced in regard to the size of council decision. And so if council was to reduce the size of council, of course, there would be financial savings. So we just ran a figure here. So on average, the financial impact of a councilor annually is $13,173. And that is broken down by the councilor honorarium, the $2,500 for budgeted for travel and training, and an average of the special and committee meeting pay. And should council find it prudent to reduce the size of council from 7 to 5, there would be an approximate savings of $26,346 annually. And over a 4-year term of council, that equates to approximately $105,386.08. So final comments here, future considerations and next steps. So again, tonight, staff are seeking council direction on the selection method for the position of the Deputy Reeve. Staff's recommendation is that the Deputy Reeve position be elected at large to be more directly representative of the preferences of the electorate. And then, so once that decision is made, follow-up report will be presented to council on July 5th regarding both the electoral system composition and the size of council. And at that meeting, staff will provide council with some initial options for composition and size for council to consider and discuss. So I'll stop sharing my screen here, and then I guess if there's any questions from the materials in the report or the presentation, I'd be happy to answer them. And if not, I can certainly hand it back over to Reeve Bailey for a discussion.
Thank you, Carson. I'm going to get a motion on the floor before we go to questions. If we don't have a motion, there's no sense having questions. So the motion that I have is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report from the clerk dated June 21st, 2021 regarding the council composition, review, and evaluation for information purposes. And further, that the council hereby resolves that the Deputy Reeve position be elected at large. And further, that the council directs the clerk to bring back to the agenda item for further discussion on the availability of the available council composition options for the July 5th, 2021 regular meeting. Do I have a mover? I have Trevor Sipes moving. Do I have a seconder? I have Anita seconding. Thank you very much. Before I put it out to the floor, I'll tell you where this is kind of coming from, and Trevor may want to speak to it too. In the last 10 days, I've spent 8 days between county and township. For the next 2 days, I will be on county. So I'm 10 days out of 12 days doing this job. The Deputy Reeve, who I'm very grateful for, you guys picked a great guy, is help me fills in and has a lot of conversations with me. But for somebody that didn't know that, and you elected him when you first get on council, it could be life altering if you've got a job you're supposed to be going to. So I just want to point that out there, and I'm going to hand it over for questions and conversation. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you. Through you, Reeve. If we vote for Deputy Reeve at large, we have to change the size and or remove the ward system. Is that what I'm gathering?
No.
So then you said at the beginning that it all depended on what we did tonight.
Yeah.
Well then how is that someone's going to lose a counselor, are they not?
Through your worship, so I can provide some clarity. So you would there is potential that you would not have to eliminate your ward system or reduce your size of council and still have your Deputy Reeve at large. You would certainly have to do something different in regard to your structure, but there is potential to do both. So for example, I'll use the Asheville Cobra Wawanash example in 2018. So they went through the exact same thing, felt the deputy needed to be directly elected by the electorate. So they implemented a system. They have 3 wards as well, 1 counselor from each ward. They wanted to retain 7. So they had the Reeve, or I guess their mayor and deputy mayor elected at large, 2 counselors elected at large, and 3 counselors, 1 from each ward. So there are certainly options where you can retain your size of council, retain your ward system. It's just things regardless of this, things will have to look a little bit different, but certainly it doesn't automatically mean, you need to be a council of 5 in order to do this, or you need to eliminate your wards in order to do this. And once we get this direction in that next report, we'll bring back some options to kind of put out to council and for your guys' consideration and feedback.
But to respond back, if, as soon as that position goes to at large, it becomes a population-based implementation that whoever gets the most votes is going to be, well, for Deputy Reeve is going to be Deputy Reeve. Also, let's be realistic about that. When you've got 3 different population bases in our municipality, the one with 5,000 votes versus the one that's got a 400 or 700 is not going to be a fair comparison and not be a fair horse race. So you are going to, you could end up with 2 councillors for the Wingham ward, a Reeve and a Deputy Reeve from the Wingham ward, and then you would have a 4-4, then it wouldn't be balanced. So we would have to change the size of the council for that to work.
Well, and I
just-
guess
I just want to speak to that, Carson, and then I'll let you speak to it. 2 things I'm going to say. One, right now your Deputy Reeve is from Wingham, and I think he's doing a good job, and you guys chose him. Okay,
Yes.
so you guys chose the guy from Wingham. So if he was elected at large, it would be no different. The second thing I want to point out is that for the last 3 terms, your Reeve was from East Wawanosh, right? Last 3 terms without a problem. He took out the guy from Wingham before that. When we first amalgamated, he took him out. So, and again, and I understand your point, Kevin, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, we are a community of communities, and I don't think the Deputy Reeve, the Reaver, I'd find it hard to believe any council would want to see harm done to any part of our society. We all work together. I find it, so anyway, I wanted to point those 2 things out, Kevin. Go ahead, Carson. Yeah, sorry.
I just got a few words. It doesn't matter where the Reeve comes from or where the deputy comes from. It makes no difference. It'll be the best people that get in. I'm quite upset about this. The driving force of this is a mystery to me. Things have been working very well as it has been. And there's no way that I can vote on this one way or the other because the consequences are too huge and we're not able to talk about it. Like, I understand, Reeve, that you want to just stay focused more on the Deputy Reeve part, but look at the consequences. Like Councillor Faulkner said, we either go to 5 or we can't stay at 7. That doesn't work. So we go to 9. Like, what do we go to? And it's a huge thing. And how do we vote not knowing those things in particular? There's a couple other things. The Deputy Reeve, why? Who is pushing that this person has to be voted at large? Like, I don't understand. And it doesn't matter what other municipalities do. We're unique. There is no other one out there with a small town, an agricultural rural area or township, and then a larger town that can just engulf everybody. And when East Wawanosh entered into this whole agreement years ago, it was stated that the wards stay. And they would be so upset. They'll be beyond upset if the wards were killed. And I tell you, breakaway time, it's that serious because Wingham, if that happens, like all the people, all 5 people, because it's going to have to go to 5. If this thing gets passed, that Deputy Reeve gets voted in or at large, we'll be going to 5. There's no other way. The dominoes fall, and that's what you got to understand. And that all of them could come from Wingham. And then what happens to Blythe? Their thoughts. And what happens to East Wawanosh? Like, it's so much safer to keep the wards, to keep, I can almost go with one person, like 3 wards, 3 councillors, and then a deputy, and then the Reeve. Like, I can live with that one, I think. Got to be careful with committees that you don't feel, if you're not on the committee, you feel left out. But do you see what I mean? This is very serious. And Carson, he just didn't, this was a very lopsided report. I know you did a good job, but it was lopsided. And you have to paint the picture, the true picture of what our municipality actually looks like. And it has worked so well, so well.
Right, and if your worship,
And
if
I
I can just explain kind of the rationale behind the way I've structured the report. So the way it is structured is based on how many municipalities have approached this, right? So I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. The reason the Deputy Reeve method of selection is incorporated in this is because it, as we're seeing here, it will have an impact on what the council looks like. So it is something that needs to be considered. The way that I've approached this is entirely data driven, right? I was not trying to speculate on these are the local contexts, these are the experiences of the municipality. That is up to you guys as councilors to speak to. Basically, there was two ways I could approach it. Here are your theoretical arguments of an at-large versus a ward system. Here are the theoretical pros and cons, right? Those are readily available. Any counselor can easily access them. What is not readily available is what are other municipalities doing of a similar nature, right? So that is why I structured it that way, to kind of bridge the gap between here's your theoretical arguments of your pros and cons of a council size of X and of an electoral system of X. Here's what other municipalities are doing as a comparison. And then there's also the local context as well that you as counselors would certainly be best suited to speak to. So that, I guess, is the rationale behind the report. And it's purely based on comparator numbers and what other municipalities are doing.
Thank you. I would just want to point out too, I believe this is from our strategic plan. Was this not on our strategic plan? Was this not a meeting that we all had at the fire hall? We all agreed on different things we wanted to move forward. I don't get where this comes from. This came out of the blue because Chris, it's in our strategic plan. We all, when we were council members, started, so our staff did not do anything behind anybody's back. It's in our strategic plan. If you look it up, we all had these discussions. We paid people to help us do it. I am hearing concerns that honestly I never thought of. So I'm listening because I'm going, I never thought of that. You picked out a good one, Kevin. Kev, before I go to you, I'm going to go to Deputy Reeve's site because he had his hand up quite a while ago.
Thank you, Reeve. I have looked at the job that the Deputy Reeve does, and I've taken a very objective approach in the sense that, I may not have been your Deputy Reeve. Like Anita Van Heersum could be your Deputy Reeve 3 years old. That was the possibility. But when I look at this from a sheer, if as a Deputy Reeve, the intention of the Deputy Reeve is obviously, the way I've always interpreted it is, if something were to happen to the Reeve, either by health, by accident, or by sheer his or her decision to resign, then the Deputy Reeve is anticipating to be that person. And to not have that person elected at large, you risk the part of the public saying, well, I never chose that person, so why would you guys just choose that person on my behalf? And that's what we're doing today. And maybe there's people out there that wished I was never Deputy Reeve. I don't know that. I'm basically indicating to you as the Reeve, as the Deputy Reeve, that I would love that this position be an electorate saying that person is the person who's been appointed by the at-large municipality. That is really what would save a whole lot of, I would argue, competition in the sense of if there's ever an issue, the municipality can say the electorate at large brought this person in. And therefore you don't have the issues and the complexities that, you know, as the clerk had mentioned, the municipality of Kincardine, it was not a slam dunk. They had a ton of conversations and stuff that went on that was caused by the public having an issue about the Deputy Reeve being selected within the initial council. So, you know, I'm looking at it as a sense that if you do it from an electoral position, then the electoral has an understanding that this person is the second in command in the sense that they understand what that person's going to be doing if the Reeve were to ever vacate that position. I think that has to be. And I also think it gives the Deputy Reeve position an understanding of if you want to sign up for that position, you now need to have this. You can't just come into your ward in the town, in my ideas in Wingham, and get voted in, and then don't have to worry about the rest of the electorate. Like, I didn't have to get voted in by Blythe residents or East Wawanosh residents. And my suspicion is those people just are just as invaluable to electing a Deputy Reeve than anybody. So, I mean, as a Deputy Reeve, I'm in favor of electing at large. And I'm saying that even if I wasn't the Deputy Reeve, only because that's the idea of me. The conversations about the wards and how this works, these are the conversations that we want to have. And I don't want to judge the fact that people are going to have concerns about how this works. Opinions are what matters. We need to talk about it. And I mean, that's the conversation. It's not against anybody. It's the fact that we have to look at it no different than we looked at the police, no different than we looked at something else. The conversation is you need to look at stuff every so often to ensure that it is doing what you're expecting it to do. Just saying, oh, it's great to have status quo isn't the right idea. We've asked staff to do something.
Yes, it is.
No,
Can
it
be.
isn't.
One at a
It
time.
can be.
Councillor
One at a
Palmer,
time.
I've asked you, I've talked, let you talk, you let me talk, please. At the end of the day, you need all of the information that staff can provide you to determine whether it's a good idea to maintain status quo. You just saying it's great to say status quo is, in my mind, irresponsible because you don't have all the information in order to make that decision. That is my opinion. I accept that opinion, but that's the conversation that I'm having. So at the end of the day, we're going to have a lot of more conversations on July 5th, but I'm saying this is a conversation that needs to be had, and it's not about taking people away. It's about making sure that people are heard in the sense that they need to be heard.
Kevin, I believe you wanted to speak.
Yes, thank you, Reeve. 2 points I just want to make. First, the situation where the Reeve or the mayor was no longer able to perform his duties or resigned, much like they did in Teeswater, Kincardine. I'm getting them all mixed up. It went back to council to ascertain whether they kept the Deputy Reeve from within the council or it went out to another vote that would trigger an election. It wasn't that was the way it was. It was the Deputy Reeve had the ability to say, yes, I want that job, or no, let's have an election. So it wasn't forced into it. They had other ways of filling that spot. My second point was I would need to know what the wording was in the constitutional agreement that was made when we amalgamated as to what they agreed on. I don't know what was agreed on back then as to whether, if this opens up that agreement to future discussions and conversations and changing that whole agreement. Are we changing something that we're just opening up the box, or are we just doing whenever we want. I'd like to know what that agreement is. If we could have staff provide us with that original agreement of what this was supposed to look like when we got together, I would like that.
You know, I think Councillor Faulkner has a very good point there. First of all, I'd like to say that no, nobody's being forced into this. I'm going to say that this was part of our strategic plan. It is before council as we all agreed to it 2 or 3 years ago at the fire hall. So don't tell me this is a surprise, because this is part of, and everything on that strategic plan will come before you. And it's not a conversation any of us maybe want to have now 3 years later, but this is what we decided as a group to talk about. Carson, I'm going to ask you a question. Kevin has a very good point there. I'm not sure, we may be violating some former agreements in that. Can we defer this until we have that information, or how would you like to handle, how could we handle this?
So I guess I guess for lack of a better way to put it, to speculate a little bit here, the order in council was imposed by the provincial government. So I highly doubt you are going to see something saying X former township gets X amount of seats into perpetuity, right? They were pretty template at the time, right? Because there's 444 municipalities now. There was at least triple that before, right? So they were pretty template standard documents. But again, we could certainly look into it for sure. But the experience of many other municipalities who have altered their council compositions would certainly lead me to believe that chances are we won't find anything. But I can certainly look into finding that order in council for sure.
Right, Kevin?
I'm prepared to vote no. I don't need that document. But if we want to,
You don't want to look at the you don't want to see the document you want?
well, I just saw that it didn't hold any weight. So
No, I don't think he was, no, my understanding was you would like to see the agreement between the three groups that got together. And there's legitimacy to that. So I don't see a reason why we couldn't just see if there is something. There's no rush for this. This needs to be done on a very forward-looking basis. Trevor said you had your hand up, was it?
No, it's Chris.
Oh, sorry, Chris had his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to apologize to Deputy Reeve site for interrupting. I shouldn't have. I need my hands tied down. Anyways, I guess my comment would be history is a great determinant of things working or not. You can take that one way or the other. That's how I look at it. It's worked well, the system that we have now, the cost saving, that's nothing. You just think about staff increase for wages is 120,000 a year. So over 4 years, that's $500,000. So it means, yeah, all money means something, but it's not a reason to not vote for something or whatever. I'm just saddened that the motion has come with, it's a defaulted to voting for the voting at large for the Deputy Reeve. I would have preferred it come back as how we direct staff or how we want to see it, because it allows for a better conversation. It's an uphill. I feel it's an uphill battle. I hate it when motions come this way, because it's an uphill battle and it's not fair to someone who feels passionate about it not happening. I hope you understand that. I'd rather that we just sort of have a nice talk about it and then we vote and you win or lose, I can stomach that better. Anyways, that's just my thoughts.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve site.
We ask staff for recommendations all the time. And I can understand where Councillor Palmer has a belief or an understanding that it's an uphill battle on certain conversations. But every municipal councillor has one vote. So when whatever recommendation is set is every recommendation that is starting off at council, the vote is 0. So I'm not exactly sure the uphill climb. At the end of the day, we all have a vote. The recommendation as it reads right now can be voted down by council, and a new motion can be applied by any councillor who wishes to make a motion. So, I mean, at the end of the day, all I'm hearing from the clerk is here's a motion that I'm recommending based on the information that I have, political or not. You decide to put political into it or not. That's your prerogative as a councillor. Arguably, the questions that Councillor Faulkner has made in regards to, are we potentially impacting any agreement? Arguably, amalgamation was forced onto amalgamated people by the province. So I don't know, and as Councillor or as Clerk Lamb has mentioned, I don't know what that agreement was, and I mean, arguably, maybe that is a good point to ask, but I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know that discussion talks more about council composition as opposed to electing the deputy Reeve in one way, shape, or form. There's lots of municipalities that are electing the deputy Reeve at large. So, I mean, I don't know what, I'm struggling to understand that the composition can necessarily be truly impacted. If you as councillors want the impact to the composition to be not as concerning, then we can have that discussion on the 5th. But this conversation is only talking about whether and I don't believe electing the deputy at large is going to impact that discussion in one way or shape or form. That's my opinion. I can be treated differently, but I don't see how it's going to truly impact it that much.
Go ahead, Councillor Faulkner.
Through you, Bernie. I don't fully agree with that one. When we have to, if we vote on that now, that changes everything afterwards. So how that you saying that just because it doesn't make a difference in one way or the other, it should be at large. But if we go that large, then that changes everything after. So it does. This particular piece changes everything else after it. So there's no way of voting it smoothly in that it changes everything, and pulling it out in one little piece first that changes everything afterwards can trick someone into voting the wrong way. And go, oh, I didn't realize that was going to happen. I didn't have that information. It changes everything. Now we've got less councillors. Now we've got this or that, or
right, Your Worship. If I can just clarify why we did that is, I just felt it was so much information for council all at once, right? So I theoretically could have brought it and said, "Here, council, make a decision. Here's the agenda on Friday. Make a decision on Monday." And so we actually did the opposite. Instead of saying, "Here, make a decision on everything," like start with this and digest the rest of it so that there's more time. But I certainly acknowledge that making this a decision on the selection method of the deputy has an impact on the council composition, and that's why I noted it throughout the slideshow that what your options look like are going to be contingent on what you're doing in regard to the selection method of the deputy, in regard to the size of council that's preferred. I just didn't want to say, "Here, council, here's a ton of information," and kind of make a decision, right? So I guess Councillor Falconer, your point is certainly valid, and I had noted it in my report as well. And I guess I just wanted to take the opportunity to explain that as the rationale behind it, to kind of give some more time for council to put some thought to the council size and the council structure, and kind of I thought kind of the deputy selection of the deputy was kind of take it for what it is, for the merits of here's the two options. The one is kind of, it's more directly representative to the electorate compared to the other one that we are familiar with now, right? So I guess that's the rationale behind it, so that it wasn't all a kind of free for all. Here's a ton of information, kind of make a decision in 4 days, right?
Thank you very much.
Three counselors, what
Yeah.
they think.
Yeah. Anita, did you have a comment? Go ahead.
Yes, through your Reeve Bailey. Yeah, thank you very much, Carson, for all your information. It's very helpful. I think it's very good that we have part of this decision in front of us right now, but I really think we have to defer it and think about it a little bit more of the consequences it will have for the whole of council. So I think I would like to defer this motion till the next meeting and talk about it, about the whole composition of council then.
So, and just to
And I
clarify, your
certainly,
worship, I was just gonna say, so you do have a motion on the floor. So
Yeah.
we'll want to vote on that motion first before another motion is put forward. And I guess just as another point here, Donna has kind of been frantically looking for the restructuring order, and from what we can see, it doesn't say anything about maintaining the restructure, the restructured structure into perpetuity. There's nothing in there.
I'll go to Anita and then back over to Deputy Reeve site.
yeah, thank you, Reeve Bailey. Also with the list we got from municipalities with 7 council members and 5 about the 5,000 population number. We are a growing municipality. I think in the last couple of years we grow above the 5,000. So I'm a little bit weary about going to 5, of not going to 5 council members, but thinking about 5 council members. If we grow even a little bit more, then if you look at the list, 7 is most appropriate in my opinion. But that's a discussion for another time.
Yes, thank you, Anita. We're going to keep that on a discussion for another day. So we do have a motion on the floor. I want to one more time remind all councilors, and I'm serious on this one. This was in our strategic plan. We talked about this as council, how we could make changes for the better. This is one of them. Nobody dreamed this up. Nobody come in the back door. Nobody should say they did not know what we were talking about. And we need to all have another look at our strat plan, including the Reeve, just to remind ourselves of where we were headed. And actually that right now is what I'm spending all this time at county for, because we did ours at the first of this council get together. And now we're having a look at our strat plan, where we wanted to go, what we have not done yet, and what we want to change. So maybe our council could think about that too. Trevor, go ahead.
My question actually is to the clerk. Based on the conversation of the council, if the mover and seconder of the original motion wants to repeal that motion, they are able to do so, correct?
If I believe either mover or seconder can amend or repeal that motion if it's in agreement with both of them, or if the direction, if it feels like council's wanting to defer it, then you can put this one to a vote. If it gets defeated, and then you put the next motion forward. So either are certainly possibilities.
Can you please tell me who the mover and seconder of the original motion is, please?
The mover is Deputy Reeve, and the seconder is Councillor Van Hitterson.
So based on the conversation that I've heard from council, and I'm looking directly at Councillor Van Hitterson and what her request is, I'm willing to repeal that motion, the original motion that was put on the table for Councillor Van Hitterson's request to either continue on or repeal it with me.
Yep. So there's two options. There's 2 options. You can amend this motion at the discretion of both the mover and the seconder, or you can repeal this motion, and then Reeve Bailey will put it out to see if there is a mover and a seconder. And if there's not, then it just doesn't come forward, and the second one goes forward. So either option is there for you guys.
So Reeve Bailey, I will amend the motion on the floor to defer defer this decision on the deputy Reeve position and the existing motion to be made with the rest of the required decisions at the July 5th committee or council meeting.
Okay with that, Anita?
Yes, I'm okay.
Okay, then it is deferred.
You have to put that to a vote, though, Your Worship.
Oh, I do. Oh, goodness sakes. Okay, everybody, it's Carson's turn again.
All right, so the draft motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the clerk dated June 21st, 2021 regarding a council composition review and evaluation for information purposes, and further that council hereby defers a decision on the method of selection for the Deputy Reeve position until the July 5th, 2021 regular meeting, and further that council directs the clerk to bring back the agenda item for further discussion on the available council composition options for the July 5th, 2021 regular meeting. So is that in line with the motion you have envisioned, Deputy Reeve Sipe and Councillor Van Henderson?
Yes.
Yes, it's good for me.
You're muted, Carson.
Sorry. So Councillor Falconer?
No,
Sorry, you cut out there, Councillor Falconer.
no.
Oh, maybe it's the audio on my end. Just 1 second, bear with me.
Could you read it again, please?
All right, my audio's back, Your Worship. So sorry about that, Councillor Falconer. So if you want to just restate your vote again.
There's been a request. There's been a request to reread the motion for Councillor Palmer, please.
Yep, so the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the clerk dated June 21st, 2021 regarding a council composition review and evaluation for information purposes, and further that council hereby defers a decision on the method of selection for the Deputy Reeve position until the July 5th, 2021 regular meeting, and further that council directs the clerk to bring back the agenda item for further discussion on the available council composition options for the July 5th, 2021 regular meeting. So Councillor Falconer?
No, I was ready to vote on it tonight.
Councillor Heffer?
Yes.
Councillor Van Henderson?
Yes.
Councillor Palmer?
Yes.
Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sipe?
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 6-1 with the no being Councillor Falconer.
Thank you very kindly. Finance Department, we have no reports. Rec and Community Services, we have no reports. Public Works and Facilities, 7.4.1. It is FA 2021-04 Wingham Armory update. That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the Director of Public Works and Facilities dated June 21st, 2021 regarding the update on the demolition of the Wingham Armories building. And further that council authorizes the Director of Finance to use reserve funds to cover the deficit cost of the demolition. And further that council directs the Director of Public Works and Facilities include the paving cost for the Wingham Armory site in the draft 2022 budget for council's consideration. I'm going to get a mover in a second, and we're going to have Jamie speak to this. Do I have a mover? Paul moves, I believe. Yep. Do I have a seconder? I have Rick McBurney seconding. Jamie, it's your turn.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Thank you, Reeve Bailey. So, good evening. I wanted to provide council an update regarding the armories, the demolition of the armories building. Due to some unseen circumstances, the budget that we had allocated for the demolition and the paving has been basically eaten up by additional asbestos found within the building that needed to be abated, as well as underground infrastructure for telecommunications and telecommunications that were too close to the foundation. They had installed that large conduit right beside the large gun range beside the foundation, and therefore additional work had to be completed in order to remove that chunk of the foundation wall and then bring back gravel, compact it, and bring it all up to grade. So within my report, that detail goes, there's more detail in my report going over the demolition process and some of the issues that were encountered during the demolition. Now, the total variance for the budget is $3,816 excluding taxes. So that amount will need to be taken from reserves. And it is staff's recommendation that the area not be paved until next year. So therefore, we can figure out how to move forward with the rear of the town hall area. So some future considerations that I was hoping council may think about is delaying the paving of the Wingham Armories provides council with an opportunity to consider and discuss potential uses of the site. One potential opportunity is expansion of the town hall to accommodate an appropriately sized and permanent council chambers location. There could also be consideration to provide additional office space within that new council chambers, or we could pave the area and install some electronic charging stations at the back of the Armories building, as well as some other and provide parking back there. And delaying the paving this year might be able to provide council with the opportunity to have a in-depth discussion, as well as giving the opportunity for the area to settle, or if there's any variances or anything like that, we'll be able to capture that during this year and then go back next year and pave it, and we shouldn't see too much settlement or anything with new asphalt on top of it. So I'll be here for further questions and for any other discussions or anything you might want to ask me. Thank you.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, through you, Reeve. I haven't been back there in a little while to see the finished grade of the gravel that is back there. Was it left at ground level, or was it left lower for the addition of 4 to 6 inches of asphalt? There isn't a 4-inch drop in that lot now that we would have to fence off or fill up with gravel in order to make it safe to leave it for a year.
Through Reeve Bailey to Councillor Faulkner, I'm very sorry. I missed the first part of what you were saying. My audio cut out.
No, it's I was just curious as to what the grade of the gravel at the back. I haven't been back to see the site in a while. Is the finished grade at asphalt level, or was it left at a depth that asphalt could be added later at 4 inches or 5 inches of asphalt? Or is it up to ground? Is it smooth now that we don't have to put fencing up or add any more gravel to? That's what my question was right now, to leave it.
Through Reeve Bailey to Councillor Faulkner, it's up to asphalt grade right now, so it's not dropped at all. There's no concern about anybody tripping or falling on that. There is still some conduit and buried infrastructure that we need to fix, but apart from that, that we're just waiting on that specific utility company to come back and fix that up. But apart from that, everything else is, there's no fencing, there's nothing required.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Deputy Reeve site.
The one thing I do want to mention is these costs would have been bared by the municipality regardless of the decision of the municipality pre-existing, whether to sell the building, whether to demolish the building. The municipality would have had these costs regardless. The only way we would have had these costs is if we sold the building as is, and we would not have been able to sell that building as is, based on some conversation, based on the conversations that the Public Works has had, but what the council has had. I just want to make sure it's clear to the public that these unforeseen costs would have been bared by the municipality regardless of the decision of council, in the previous decisions of council.
Hi, Paul.
Thank you, Reeve. Just on your report there, it says each of these options has benefits and drawbacks. Will we be discussing that further down the road, if I understood you right?
Through Reeve Bailey to Councillor Heffer, yes, I wanted to provide council another report, probably a joint report with myself and Clerk Lamb, just to kind of go through what the previous discussions were and also bring a broader discussion as to what can be completed with the land behind the town hall.
Thank you.
Hey, anyone else? I am not seeing anyone. Carson, refresh my memory. I have a mover and seconder.
That's correct, Your Worship.
It's your ball game now.
Thank you, Your Worship. So Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Site,
Yes.
Deputy, yep, okay.
Yeah.
And Councillor Falconer
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. We have no fire department, building department, or childcare department reports tonight. So we're going to go to 7.8.1, the building services delivery option. Now, I am not going to ask for a mover and seconder on this one because we have 3 or 4 options. I believe council should just have a good foolhardy discussion of it and insert the 1 or 2 or 3 ways you'd like to go with this. So Dwayne, I'm going to hand it over to you and we'll have this discussion.
Thanks, Your Worship. So just as a reminder, on June 7th, Council received correspondence from Morris Turnberry with respect to terminating the shared building services agreement effective December 31st. And Council directed and asked staff to prepare a report regarding options on a go-forward basis. So just in terms of building activities or the services that are currently being provided by that agreement, we certainly have building services, which includes issuing building permits, as well as zoning certificates, but as well drainage services or drainage superintendent, bylaw enforcement, property standards are also provided through that agreement. So in terms of, I've kind of broken out a little bit looking at the building department first, and I've kind of done a little bit of reaching out as far as kind of what's happening in other municipalities. We issue approximately 100 building permits per year, plus or minus. In comparison, when I did a review, Howick Township, for example, they issue approximately 100 as well. And for that 100 building permits, they employ a part-time chief building official. In comparison, if you look at a larger municipality, for example, like South Huron, they issue approximately 200 permits per year. They employ a full-time CBO, a building inspector, and an administrative assistant. So if you look at it from a building permit perspective only, I think it's fair to say that we would be adequately serviced by a part-time building official. When I talked to Howick Township's clerk, their part-time building official arrangement is working well. In addition to issuing the building permits, their CBO conducts all building inspections, plumbing and septic inspections, issues zoning certificates, and also attends council meetings on an as-needed basis. And indications are that the workload for that CBO is certainly manageable. So as far as looking at our in more detail, in terms of the time allocation, through the shared services arrangement, and as you recall from a previous report, the CBO and the building inspector were spending an equal amount of time, an equal amount of their North Huron and Morris Turnberry time on building services. More of the CBO's time was spent dealing with property standards and enforcement issues in North Huron than Morris Turnberry, and comparatively more of the CBO's time was spent dealing with drainage matters in Morris Turnberry than North Huron. So I think that's important to keep in the back of our minds. In terms of our costs, North Huron shared building services expenditures over the past 4 years have ranged from a high of $232,000 in 2017 to 125 in 2019. And those expenditures include the salaries, inspection contracts, office space, training, subscriptions, memberships. Staff costs of those have ranged from 195,000 in 2017, bearing in mind that was offset by revenue from Howick and Morris Turnberry to a low of 104,000 in 2019. So during the same 4-year period, building services ranged from a high of 130 in 2020 to a low of 91 in 2018. So those, I think, are important numbers to keep in mind as we go forward. So staff have identified, in terms of looking again at building services only, 3 possible options for council to consider. And those are with respect to the issuing of building permits, conducting plumbing and septic inspections, and issuing zoning certificates. And in terms of those options, I'll just run them through them quickly. In terms of option 1, generally speaking, I think it's important to note that the shared agreement with Morris Turnberry has worked well. If there was another shared service arrangement within a municipality to be considered, there's certainly some operational aspects that we would, from a staff's perspective, like to look into and give further consideration to. Based on some preliminary investigations, there is another municipality who has expressed an interest in having discussions regarding another shared services arrangement. They are aware of the terminated shared services agreement with Morris Turnberry. And in terms of keeping council's options open, one of the recommendations here is that we keep that option open and we allow for further discussions and conversation around the potential for another shared service building arrangement. A second option is we contract out with a third-party provider. This is a less common approach to providing building services, but it's certainly possible. Howick Township back in 2018 did secure a third-party provider. And again, when I talked to Howick Township's clerk, they indicated that that arrangement worked well. But after a year into it, council decided that rather than contracting out the service, they expressed a preference to have a CBO on staff. So Howick Township did an internal review and they, as I previously stated, did recruit a part-time CBO. Again, preliminary investigations suggest that third-party contractors charge around 120 to 180 per hour plus expenses, which includes your mileage. And again, further investigation is needed, but it seems that the hourly rate would begin from the time that they leave their office until the time that they get to the municipality, back to the time that they get back to the office. In terms of, I think it's important to bear in mind that we don't have any third-party providers in this immediate area, so we certainly be looking to retain that service from a larger urban center. A third option is to recruit a chief building official, either full-time or a part-time basis. And in doing so, we have to develop a job description, we have to ban the position, and that obviously would require council's approval. Based on building inspector position is currently in band 7. So CBO would certainly be above a band 7. So if a permanent position was created, there would be about 97,000, and when you add the benefits and everything onto it, it runs around 120,000 for salaries and benefits. I think that's very reasonable in terms of being able to hire a full-time CBO. Over the past 3 years, we have paid on average about 112,000 to Morris Turnberry for salaries and benefits. So you're looking at a potential cost increase or adjustment of about $8,000. But you need to bear in mind that, for example, we've been paying Morris Turnberry $4,000 for office space and utilities. And on the basis that the individual would be housed in our building, we would not have that additional cost. So potentially, when all is said and done, it is possible for us to hire a full-time CBO with minimal impact on our budget. And obviously, in terms of that's a full-time, if we weren't to go with a part-time arrangement, that cost would obviously be less. But I think it's important to bear in mind that there is a shortage of qualified CBOs across the province. And again, Howick Township was successful in recruiting a part-time CBO, and there's nothing suggests that we would not be equally successful. But in terms of being able to recruit, it's believed, although we haven't actually gone through the process, that a full-time permanent position be more attractive to a qualified individual than a part-time arrangement. But again, that's speculative on our part. Until we actually would go through the process, we wouldn't know the answer. The other consideration, if we were to consider full-time, is depending on the individual's qualifications. There may be some opportunity here for, as your council's aware, we've been successful with some grant applications for some facility projects. And this individual, depending on their level of expertise, may be able to assist the Director of Public Works and Facilities with some of our capital projects. And the last option, not the least option, is to renegotiate an agreement with Morris Turnberry. If you were to proceed down that path, it is expected that the agreement would cost you more. Certainly, from staff's perspective, we would envision an increase of minimum of $10,000 to $12,000. And when you look at what we're currently paying plus additional costs, and then you look at what the costs are to hire our own full-time CBO, that's all for consideration. So with respect to drainage, prior to the shared building services arrangement, we contracted our drainage superintendent services with Dietrich Engineering. When I looked at the Drainage Superintendent Association Ontario website in this area, it looks like Dietrich Engineering, RJ Burnside are the two primary drainage superintendent providers. And there are some municipalities who do have an existing individual on staff with the qualifications. But I think it's important to bear in mind there is a grant that we do receive from OMAFRA to help offset some of those drainage superintendent costs. So just on a final note, the service delivery review, as you recall, conducted by KBMG, encourages us to consider advancing shared service arrangement. Again, the shared service pilot project was undertaken, and with respect between the North Huron and Morris Turnberry, it was later resolved. One of the services that did survive that pilot project was building services, but as you're aware, Morris Turnberry has decided that's not in their best interest, and they wish to dissolve that arrangement. So from that perspective, in terms of it's recommended, I guess, that we remain open to a shared services arrangement with other municipalities, but at the same time, give consideration to a full-time CBO.
Thank you very much, Dwayne.
Any questions?
Thank you very much, Dwayne. So I am not going to, again, I'm not going to read this motion. I want to hear what council has to say because there's several options there, although it's a good looking motion on there. We're going to start with Anita. Go ahead, Anita.
Thank you, Reeve Bailey. Dwayne, in your report, in the discussion, you're talking about the CBO, the building inspector, and the administrative assistant. That's we're all replacing that with one chief building official, or how can we compare the cost with 3 people that we had with Morris Sternberry, and then we go to one building official?
Through you, your worship. So just as far as we have approximately 100 building permit applications, and when you add on the Morris Turnberry numbers, it's up over the 200 mark. So I think it's around 250. And when you go from 100 to 250, you certainly need more staff, which is what we actually see when we consider and look, when we looked at other municipalities. And, you know, just to give a comparison, South Huron is up around 200 building permits. So I guess in terms of almost 100 permits per staff member. So we're you know, 100 maybe for full time. And then when you have more staff and when you add on drainage, you're increasing your staff complement. But the drainage would be contracted out. We would strictly be doing 100 building permits. Howe Township has about 100 building permits. They've been able to provide the building service component only with a part-time CBO. But certainly when you add in drainage, you add property standards, and you're in bylaw enforcement, it would be more than part-time at that point when you add that all in. So I don't know if I've answered your question, Councillor Van Heersum, or whether I've...
Yeah, sort of, with the 100 inspections. So this chief building official is going to look after everything that the full-time building inspector and the administrative assistant do, and that's still within their the part-time job, or what kind of a, yeah, are we looking at a part-time job, or and are we going to add an administrative assistant? Is 100 permits enough, and we can have a full-time or a part-time person look at this?
So through your worship, as far as in terms of the recommendation, I guess, is consideration of full-time CBO that would do building permits, issuing zoning certificates, assisting with property standards matters, bylaw enforcement issues, but during, I'll call it the slower times, could also assist our facilities. In terms of administrative support, our frontline staff have been providing some administrative support. So we have the capacity, there is some capacity within our frontline administrative staff to take on some of that. But certainly, you know, depending on workload, if the CBO has time within their available time, you know, they would do it. But we would certainly have our administrative support staff available to either do it or support the CBO in those efforts. But I guess in terms of, we're not proposing, or I'm not proposing more administrative staff. We would just hire a potential full-time CBO.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Chris and then Paul.
Thank you, Reeve. Yeah, judging by the numbers from what Dwayne has been saying, we only need a part-time. I'm glad to hear what you said, though, Dwayne, about an assistant as being part of the front line that we already exist, because we just can't keep hiring people. Another question, a good question I have is, how do you use Dietrich or Burnside as a the CBO, like hire them out and not have a conflict of interest? Like if you hired Dietrich and then we selected Dietrich as the engineer for a particular job, how does that work?
Through you, your worship. I mean, that's a good question, and I don't know the details around it. What I can tell you is that that was the arrangement before we went into the shared building services with Morris Turnberry. So that would suggest to me that it is somehow possible, but I don't know the details around it. But certainly, if that was the wish of council, you know, I would, and I think you'll see in the report recommendation is to investigate and source that out a little bit more in detail. But it is a good question. I agree.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Paul. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I
Dwayne
was
had
just saying
more.
the other option is you hire or you share drainage superintendent services with another municipality. So,
Thank you. Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, thank you, Reeve. Yeah, I just wish that we're given this report back in our March meeting. I think we could have figured something out. I'm glad to hear that the front line is going to be able to look after the secretarial work. I'm just not sure the drainage. I'm just not sure if I'm understanding that right. What is that grant that we're getting, Dwayne? Would it be like 50%, 70%? Because that really makes a big difference on that salary that you think that it's not going to move up too much. I just wonder what that grant is, or is it a 95% grant? Just for our information, that could have quite a bearing too on the final price of things. Thank you.
yeah, through your worship, in terms of, I'm not an expert on that grant. I don't know, Carson, if you've been dealing with the grant more so than I have, but it's certainly the expectation or the thinking is that the grant, when you look at our drainage budget, the grant that we receive does help offset a large cost associated with drainage services. So I wouldn't anticipate, again, I have to explore this in more detail, but I wouldn't anticipate that we would see a huge significant increase with contracting that out. But again, with respect to drainage services, I mean, if we were to, if for when we investigate that, and if it was to come back and we were to see a significant increase or jump, that doesn't, drainage services is separate from building services. So you still would need CBO services of some form, whether it's through your hiring or through another arrangement or shared arrangement with another municipality. But in terms of your drainage superintendent services, I mean, as much as right now it's all part of one service, technically they're all separate, or technically it's a separate. And we either would have to do either a shared services arrangement with a municipality, or we could, you know, maybe hire a part-time drainage superintendent, or again, explore the contract. But certainly indications are that most municipalities have Dietrich Engineering, RJ Burnside, or they have a qualified person on staff.
Thank you. Paul had a follow-up. Go ahead.
Oh, yes, a follow-up to that. I just was wondering through that, like, is there any chance like Public Works or somebody can be doing that? Like, I'm sure like they're very qualified people. Just wondering if there's training we could put towards that to maybe offset bringing Mr. Diedrich up that X number of kilometers up the highway. Just a thought. That's all. Thanks.
Christopher?
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. Is it, okay, this is option 4. I'm not talking about the CBO position, but is it a possibility to talk to them about just the drainage aspect? Hiring someone there to do it, because they know our land, they know our people, they've got experience already. Like, I'm just asking, is that something that is possible to look at?
Through your worship, I would certainly say yes, but that's something that can be looked into, investigated.
I would pretty well bank on, if you're going to go talk to them about anything, it's either going to be, the answer is going to be the original and always no, or it's going to cost you as much money, as Dwayne has pointed out, as if you had your own man on staff anyway. But it's whatever council wants. Okay, anybody else? Not seeing anybody. I'm going to read the motion then. I think.
Councillor Falconer, your worship.
Oh, sorry, Kevin.
Yeah, I might be in your background there. No. Yes, the 10% difference for having that we were paying for one for 50% of the time and having one for full time in our dealing with our municipality. I'm in great favor of that, and I think that's the way it should always be. And if we were going into a joint another joint agreement, I think I would push heavily that we were on the 60% side and not the 40% side, so that all that termination agreement there would be it would be ours to implement and not be shocked when it came through as it did the last time. So I'm quite happy with the numbers that Dwayne has presented to us, and I think it's a pretty simple formulation of what you get for your dollar value and what we were getting before for almost the exact same dollar value. I think that's a no-brainer. Thank you.
Thank you. Trevor, go ahead.
Sorry. I'm good. Okay. Thank you, Reeve. As it relates to the motions that are on the floor, or are going to be on the floor based on the recommendations here, we're giving the CAO the option to source a third-party provider for drainage superintendent. We're not saying who that is. We're just asking him to source it. So, at the end of the day, that source can be anybody, and I think ultimately those discussions are going to be had. So, arguably anything is possible, and I would leave everything on the table. I don't think anything should be off the table in the sense of when it talks about the drainage superintendent discussion, because obviously that's not something that is not a qualification that we have readily available to us in the municipality. We found that out. Very quickly when we didn't have when the original shared service arrangement came into fruition. So we didn't have that availability. That's why Dietrich did it originally. Any possible investigation of any of these services, I'm more than happy to look at based on the CAO's recommendations when he comes forward. I think ultimately the CBO, in my opinion, probably is in the best case interest of us is to have somebody on staff, so that we are, as we've been talking about before, we are a growing and hopefully continuing growing municipality, which is going to only require more services than less. So arguably, yeah, we have 100 permits now, but my suspicion is over the next little bit that could grow to as much as 150, 175 based on development and on what we're seeing. So, arguably, I think that this information that Dwayne has provided is enough that we can look at, and hopefully we can make a decision and move forward tonight.
Just to add to that, you could have somebody out there say that has decided that he wants to slow life down a bit and has all the qualifications, and for the amount of money we're offering, and work for us for 4 days a week and have his Fridays off every Friday, just kind of like the appliance guy. Having said that, I'm going to read the motion now. That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report prepared by the CAO dated June 21st, 2021 regarding building services delivery options for information. And further, that the council directs the CAO to develop a draft full-time chief building official job description for council's consideration. And further, the council authorizes the CAO to investigate possible sharing services, building services, deliveries, options with other municipalities and report back to the council. And further, that the council authorizes the CAO to source a third-party provider for the delivery of drainage superintendent services effective January 1st, 2022. Do I have a mover? Paul moving. Do I have a seconder? I have Paul Heffer. I believe you are moving, Paul. Okay, Paul's moving. Yeah.
So if there's no further discussion, I'll call the recorded vote. So Councillor, oh, go ahead, Councillor.
Sorry, Chris just put his hand up. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, thank you,
Yep.
Reeve. I'm just looking at the motion and the first, and further that we're looking for a full-time, and then the following further that it's possible shared. That's not the same. That's
No,
not a
he's got the
full-time,
other-
or is
he'll have
Right,
the
so, yeah, so the direction would be that the direction provided to the CAO to draft a job description, but at the same time, keep the options open and investigate possible shared service arrangements with other municipalities. So basically, Dwayne will be doing two things: carrying out the development of a full-time job description for a chief building official, but also keeping the options open and investigating what's out there for chief building official shared services arrangements. Because as the CAO noted, one other municipality has already inquired into that.
Deputy Reeve, if you just wanted to follow up before we go for the motion, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify for Councillor Palmer, there is going to be a report that comes back that indicates whether we're going to hire or we're going to shared services. That there is another report coming back. This is just making sure he's got the acceptance to do both in conjunction, and then come back to our council to request whether we go with hiring a full-time chief building official or share services arrangement based on what information he gets back.
okay?
Thank you, gentlemen. Go ahead, Carson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey. So that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Correspondence 8.1 is the Museum Committee recommendation for the clerk to not schedule a delegation until council meetings are in person. I'm going to get a mover and seconder, and then we'll have Carson speak to why.
So there is no motion yet, Your Worship.
Oh, goodness sakes.
So I'll just kind of give some context on that. So as council will have seen, there was the relevant excerpt from the Museum Committee meeting held June 10th. And as you will have seen, that committee has completed its mandate. The final report and presentation are considered final and ready to be presented to council. But in that motion, they have also recommended that the delegation not be scheduled until council begins to meet in person in 2021. And in the event that council is not able to meet in person, the committee agrees to present via virtual council meeting in 2022. So I guess for a little context, North Huron's procedure bylaw does authorize myself as the clerk. It basically, the procedure bylaw says, at the discretion of the clerk, the delegation will be scheduled to make a presentation to a regular council meeting. However, because the committee did pass that motion, I did want to leave that decision up to council of what council wants to do. If council wants myself as the clerk to schedule it, I would certainly continue to move things forward, and I would schedule it for the next available meeting. But if council wants to support the committee's recommendation that it not be scheduled till the next in-person meeting, then I would take that direction, and I would account for that when scheduling delegations, and I would schedule it when we're back in person again. But Councillor Heffer is certainly the chair on that committee, so I believe I've captured the essence of what the committee is intending there. So unless there's anything else to add, Councillor Palmer, I'll leave it with council to provide myself some direction on scheduling that delegation.
Just before we go any further, Paul Heffer, I'd like you to speak to this. You are the chair of that committee, and explain why this request is being made and how you feel about it. You're on mute. You're muted. You're muted. You're muted, Ken. Okay, thank you.
Through you, Reeve. Yes, I voted for this. They've put a lot of work into this, a lot of hours, these folks here, and they'd really like to do it in person, but they realize that if it can't be done this year, they'll do it early in 2022 with the way things are. Where I know we have things to get going too here, but I'm in favor of them getting a bit of time, and then hopefully it'll go to open thing. They just like to make that presentation to us, because there's some other things you read in there that were added in about the office places and whatnot. That's why they want to be able to show what's going on there, that there's a reason for their planning. Thank you.
Mr. Heffer, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I'd like to say that we wait for till council comes together again and let them bring their presentation to us.
Do I have a seconder? I have Rick McBurney seconding. Questions, comments, or concerns? Go ahead, Deputy Reeve Sipe, and then Kevin Faulkner.
So I have a comment. I don't have any concern as it relates to providing this exemption for the committee to do so. One thing that I will indicate, and I'm wondering if Councillor Heffer and Councillor McBurney would be okay to add, is that once the committee or once council meets in person, that the clerk has the responsibility to schedule it based on priority. Like, I mean, arguably, and we have to understand, the committee has requested to delay that. All of a sudden, the first meeting that we become in person, I need this committee to understand that they're not all of a sudden automatically going to be the first delegation that sits. So, I mean, depending on what the priorities of council are, the clerk has the responsibility to determine that with, obviously me and the Reeve sit on council agenda preparation. So we've got that in place as well. But I just want to make sure that the council understands that I don't think it's fair that says, we're going to delay this, and then all of a sudden, as soon as the first time we meet, that they get automatically first indication that they're going to meet. So I mean, I think as long as they understand that if it suits the priorities of council, that it is done at that time, but it's no main saying it's the very first meeting that we come back on in person.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve Sipe. Mr. Heffer?
Yes, I'm sorry. I said that wrong. They're planning on waiting till it's their opportune time. They know there will be a lot of things coming up. So yes, for sure, what you said there, Deputy Reeve Sipe, that they're on that ballpark. Yeah.
And Rick McBurney, you're fine with that?
I agree with that. Yes.
Okay, and you've got that all, Carson?
Yep. So unless there's changes to the motion, but basically as of right now, it reads that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby directs the clerk to not schedule the Museum Committee delegation until in-person meetings are held again. And further, that the clerk be directed to schedule the delegation based on priority once in-person meetings are permitted. So if that captures the essence of what is intended, unless there's further discussion, I'll call that vote.
Yeah, I see. No, Kevin Faulkner would like to speak to it.
Thank you, through Reeve Bailey. I'm a little confused with the asking for this coming through council is that they could bring forward their report at any time without having us to do anything to vote on whether we give them the ability to do it now versus later. I like to have a level playing field for everyone. If we do this, then I don't see how we cannot deny past presentators if they felt their presentation was not at a level that they thought they were confident with how the council was going to proceed it, to allow another group to hold up the business of the township until they think it's favorable that they could get a different response by having us face to face than doing it how we've done it electronically. I don't think there's any difference between electronically and in person that would give one priority over the other. I just don't see that's fair.
Thank
My
you, Mr.
opinion.
Falcon. I'm not sure, that was a statement or a question?
No, that was just a statement. How could we allow one group to do it while the past groups didn't get that option?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Palmer?
Thank you, Reeve. Yeah, when I first read this, the first thing along the lines of where you're headed, Kevin, my first thought was they want to have a huge number of supporters in the back. There's nothing wrong with that, but we can't pick and choose. For me, if it's ready, we should be looking at it. That was my first thought. They wanted a ton of supporters.
Well, and Reeve Bailey, if I can clarify as well to another point, and I guess if council does not provide direction to it, I will continue to schedule delegations as I normally would, and it would come forward kind of right away. The other piece too, and this might be more for Councillor Heffer to speak to, but if the intention is for them to have a number of people in the town hall theater, we might be able to meet in person, but with numbers restrictions, right? So that might say you might be able to meet in person again, but that might be capped at 10, 15 for all we know, right? So if I guess better for Councilor Heffer to speak to it, but if that's the intention, we might not be there for a while. And I certainly couldn't speak to where the province is headed, but certainly something for council to consider.
Well, the other thing that has to come up too as part of the conversation is Vicky here, who just popped up. Her and her staff are part of this, and we have a lot of staff working on it, and it's been going on quite a while. So there was a bit of a, I'm not going to call it a push, but there was a bit of a few comments made about this can't go on forever because it's costing us, the town, too much money to have meeting after meeting after meeting. And with the COVID-19 going on, and we're taking care of the clinics and that, we needed our staff in other areas. So the conversation was had with them that, it looks like everything's pretty well ready. You're ready to come. But they requested that do we just make sure that we get to meet in person? And that's, to me, that's fine with me. I don't see why anybody would worry about it. I do understand, again, some of the comments that are made about this could set precedent, but I don't think it does. But we can't have our staff meeting and meeting and meeting and meeting and meeting and meeting, waiting for COVID to go away so these people can speak to the hard work they've done, and they've worked hard on this. So I just want to throw that out there too, folks. Oh, where were we anyway? Go ahead, Vicky.
Through you, your worship. You're correct. The group has been working very, very hard at putting together this presentation, and I think that's one of the main reasons is that they do want to do it in person. I mean, they certainly do want to have as many people there to support it as possible. That is part of it too, but they just feel that, it won't have the same effect if it's virtual versus in person. We did discuss though that, we don't know when council will be meeting in person again, and that's where they did amend the recommendation there so that it said, for 2021, and if they're not able to meet in person in 2021, then they would do a virtual presentation in 2022. In terms of staff's concerns, one of my concerns deals with budget. And when we're looking at the budget and the timing of this, in terms of we will be doing, start budget presentations to council in November. And if they haven't done their presentation at that point, then, what position is that going to put council in say January or February if they want to come forward and then want council to make a decision on the project. We did discuss it at the last committee meeting, and as Councillor Heffer can attest. They said that, you know, they don't anticipate this even being included in the 2022 budget. There's I have mixed feelings on it in terms of that, because we are going to have to do the deaccessioning and even preparation work to do a move if council approves the move. Whether or not council approves the programs or the move to the other site, there is some deaccessioning that's going to have to occur because there are a lot of artifacts there that we have 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 of, and things like that. So my idea was that it would be kind of two types or two processes going on at the same time, but they felt very strongly that that wouldn't be the case. So I don't know if Councillor Heffer wants to comment on that, but from staff's point of view, we were really concerned with how this timing of this presentation would work into the budget process. Because we were looking that a decision was going to have to be made, and we would have to know what we were doing before the 2022 budget was approved.
Thank you kindly. Did you want to speak to that, Paul?
I see where Vicky's going with that, and that did come up to them, and they just figured that they wouldn't need any money involved because it'll take a year to get their money. I think they're asking for a year to get the money, but I think Vicky sort of brought to their attention that there's deaccessioning that could be happening if it goes ahead, like so much depends if it's goes forward or not, right? But Vicky made it clear to them that this budget has to be done by November, early November, I think it was, or end of October, Vicky said.
Through your worship, it was that we start doing our submissions to the finance department in late October, early November, and then there's usually a presentation later in November, early December for council and things, because we were dealing with this in our budget in December of 2020. So
go ahead, Kevin.
I think if we're going to allow this to be postponed, that we postpone all delegations until we can meet in person, so it's a level playing field for everyone. I know you hate me hearing me say this over and over again, but you can't change it for one and not change it for everybody. I'm just sorry, I'm just not comfortable with just being, oh, I'm okay with it this time, but not the next time, and not for everybody else behind. So if we're going to do it, let's just make a motion that, to be fair to everybody, we push everything off until we meet in person.
Thank you. Deputy Reeve Site.
I think the one thing I do want to say is that I don't disagree with the context of what Councillor Faulkner has talked about. The only difference of this is a committee that we asked to be formed. This is a committee of council. This is not Bob, your builder, coming for a delegation to ask us for something else or whatever. It's a committee that we asked to be formed, and they're asking for requests. So I mean, as long as we have provided them all the information as to their discussion, there's lots of stakeholders in this discussion that want to have a certain way. At the end of the day, if they understand the discussion of what's going on and they're comfortable, what my concern has always been is council gets looked at in a bad light as, oh, we've delayed this process. No, we've talked about this process. We're willing to talk about it. This committee's looking for us to move it. As long as they understand that that could happen, that could or couldn't happen, and may or may not then impact budget, and then may or may not impact at all. Because I think the other part that hasn't been mentioned here is that in 2022, we're going into an election. So by the end of 2022, there's not going to be any decisions made of council on any real massive change, because you're in you're in an issue of that perspective of an election. So as long as this committee understands that, I am confident in accepting the fact that if they want to delay it, because we've asked them to do this committee, I'm accepting of that as an opinion of myself. What I'm going to say is that's why I've made it very clear is that we as counselors, I am not holding this up. They've asked for something. I'm respectfully looking at their ask and accepting whether I want to be accepting of that responsibility.
Mr. Faulkner?
Thank you through your. Yes, I agree with Deputy Sipe, but we've had committees for fundraising for a pond come upon us that weren't allowed to fill the arena or the complex with people to support their referendum during COVID and during these without allowing them the same privilege, only because they're stating that they don't want to come back. That it's not that they're not ready; they don't want to come back until they can have an audience. I don't think that we need to stop the business of the municipality for a favoritism of that. If they don't want to bring it to us, don't bring it to us. Don't come and say, well, we've got a report and it's done, but then don't bring it till there's a crowd. We don't need to vote on it and make it a motion of council to allow this group to do one thing differently than the other groups. They don't want to bring it till that's time. That's great. Don't bring it till that time. But I just don't feel right voting to give one group the privilege of that when the other groups didn't get that privilege. And that is a precedent. I'm sorry.
So we've had a good, robust conversation about this. I'm going to reach out to my staff and ask for a little bit of help. But first, Paul, how do you feel about this? You were the chairman of the board on that one. Do you want to go back to them and have this discussion with them and say, no, we have to simply put it on the agenda and make it work and explain to them it's because of budgetary situations and the fact there is another
Well, so Reeve Bailey, if I can just stop you there.
Yeah.
So as in that motion, another part of that motion, the committee has passed a motion there that says their mandate is done. So basically that committee ceases to exist now. So you can't really go back to them because they've said they're done their mandate, right? So I guess to make a long story short here, we as staff just need direction on how council wants us to go about scheduling this delegation, whether that's to be in person or kind of scheduled virtually right away.
Okay, so do we have a motion on the floor right now?
Yes, we do.
Okay, what was the motion on the floor, please, Trevor or Carson?
So the motion on the floor is that the council of the township of North Huron hereby directs the clerk to not schedule the museum committee delegation until in-person meetings are held again. And further, that the clerk be directed to schedule the delegation based on priority once in-person meetings are permitted.
And the mover and seconder?
Your mover is Councillor Heffer and your seconder is Councillor McBurney. The one thing I will note in this motion, priority is subjective, and myself as the clerk I do not want to be responsible for here's what priority is. So I'm wondering if that could be maybe, if council is going in this way, to amend it based on agenda workload or something along those lines. Basically, myself as a clerk, what I usually do is schedule things so you don't have 5 delegations, 3 public meetings, kind of all on the same meeting. So instead of based on priority, but based on the amount of agenda items or something.
So Paul, can you adjust your motion? Can you help Carson? Go ahead. Go ahead, Trevor.
Sorry, Paul, I just want to add to this. Putting it as priority isn't adding, it's not, we as council, as Deputy Reeve and Reeve, sit with the CAO and the clerk every 2 weeks to talk about an agenda. So, I'm going to tell you right now, when I sit on those meetings, this is going to be on my list that says, can this fit in or can it not? And if that's the case, then we'll talk about whether it can be fit in based on what the workload of council has to be. No, I'm not suggesting Carson has to be the, the bad news to that group. I'm suggesting that we should be able to communicate with that group to indicate to them that it is or it isn't going to be on those meetings. We know what the agenda is going to be published and how we think it's going to be published before Friday comes, based on the discussions that we have.
So going back to that, Paul, so can we somehow amend that?
Well, if that is the intention of it, it's up to council. If council's comfortable with that wording, then you guys as council are comfortable with that wording, and that's fine. Ultimately, it depends on what you want to do as council. So, if by priority it's meant to not be subjective, then that's certainly fine. If it's in regard to more workload, then.
Because I can tell you personally, and I'm sure Trevor can back me up on this, there's quite a workload. There's just, we have to prioritize what needs to be done. Like all of a sudden getting hit with, we need a new building inspector. Well, all of a sudden we get hit with A2A falls flat. Well, all of a sudden we've got people wanting to know why contracts weren't signed for building. That we got a lot of workload here. So it's not going to be on a priority list from where I'm standing. Like as far as getting it in there, I've got too many other things on the go. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, Reeve, is it possible to amend it to that we fit this this report in, and then put a deadline saying by November 30th or something? Is that a possibility? It gives a bit of time for changes as far as COVID goes, and then it allows staff to fit it in where it's practical.
Honestly, I just wanted to just get it in there. And as Trevor said, when we're sitting down and discussing things, it will come on the agenda, period.
Fine, yeah.
Okay. Like, can we just do that, guys? Carson, can we make that change, please? And with mover and seconder okay with it?
So Councillor Palmer used the word practicality. That certainly is a better word as far as I'm concerned, right? So if council's accepting of that, and by practicality, that will be the amount of other agenda items on the agenda.
Yeah.
Right. So if the mover and seconder is fine with that, the motion would be that the council of the Township of North Huron hereby directs the clerk to not schedule the museum committee delegation until in-person meetings are held again, and further that the clerk be directed to schedule the delegation based on practicality once in-person meetings are permitted.
Paul shaking his head yes. Rick, you okay? Yes, okay. We have a mover seconder. The motion was just read. Carson, roll call.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'll read it one last time here just so everyone is on the same page. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby directs the clerk to not schedule the museum committee delegation until in-person meetings are held again, and further that the clerk be directed to schedule a delegation based on practicality once in-person meetings are permitted. So, Councillor Palmer?
I need more discussion. The in-camera, or sort of where it's in camera, in person, I thought that we were gonna go to what's practical moving forward, if it's by the 5th of July, or is it way into October? That was in my mind, so I'd have a hard time. I'm very sensitive to being fair with other committees. What's good for one should be good for all. I have trouble with the in-person part. Sorry.
Yeah, and so the way the motion reads right now, basically, it's providing direction to myself to not schedule that delegation until in-person meetings are held. So if in-person meetings are not held till 2023, that is when it will be scheduled. That is how the motion reads right now.
That's what they asked for.
Nope. Excuse me.
Paul,
they have put a timeline on it in their motion. They have recommended that it be held in person. But if in person is not permitted until 2022, then it be virtual, right? But there in council's draft motion as is, there is no timeline. There is no deadline associated with it. So if that is something council wants, you will need to add that into the motion.
I think we need a deadline.
Trevor.
The intention of what I had added to Councillor Heffer and Councillor McBurney's motion was basically the motion of the committee. But just if we want to include the practicality part of it, fine. I'm fine with that. That'll satisfy you, Clarson, as the clerk from practicality perspective. And there it'll be solved the committee as they're going to get there in person when it is in person. If it's not in person, then you'll schedule on in the year 2022 when it's in virtually. That's the intent.
Not sure where we're going from here because we just run a circle for 2 hours. So I'm going to kind of bring this to an end if I can. Carson, read the motion. Let's vote.
Yeah, so I've added that timeline, your worship. So basically the motion reads that the council of the township of North Huron hereby directs the clerk to not schedule the museum committee delegation until in-person meetings are held again. And further that the clerk be directed to schedule the delegation based on practicality once in-person meetings are permitted. And further that if in-person meetings are not permitted by the end of 2021, the delegation be held virtually.
Okay, guys,
Call it.
we have a mover and a seconder. I see their heads nodding. Okay, Carson, roll call.
Okay, so just again, the motion on the floor is that the council of the township of North Huron hereby directs the clerk to not schedule the museum committee delegation until in-person meetings are held again. And further that the clerk be directed to schedule the delegation based on practicality once in-person meetings are permitted. And further that if in-person meetings are not permitted by the end of 2021, the delegation be held virtually. So Councillor Palmer?
Yes.
Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight?
Yes.
Councillor Falconer?
No.
Councillor Heffer?
Yes.
Councillor Van Henderson?
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey. So that motion carries 6-1 with the no being Councillor Heffer or Councillor Falconer, sorry.
We just set a precedent. Hope we can keep it up.
I hear. Okay, moving on. Correspondence. Nope, we're going to go to council reports. The Reeves activity report. Just want to say that ironically as this is, tomorrow we're entering our third day at county of our stat review, our strategic plan review. And from the discussions that we've had at this council, maybe we should have ours coming up in the next little while just to refresh our memories of what we want set out to do, how far we are on our projects. And let's see how many of them we're going to be able to make in the next, whatever it is, year and a half that we have left. Okay, I want to talk about the mass vaccine clinic, if you don't mind. And I would like to take this opportunity to recognize everyone involved in the recent mass vaccination clinic in the West Cass Community Complex. A special thanks to the many staff and volunteers from North Huron, as well as the staff from Howick Township, who put in long hours to make it happen and assist visitors throughout the clinic. I'd also like to thank Huron Perth Public Health and their supporters for their tremendous support leading up to and during the clinic. It's a team effort, and it was great to see everyone working together to get needles in arms. Special thank you goes out to our recreation staff for going above and beyond to have the facility ready. And I would like to also thank Reeve Hardy and Howick Township for the use of their tables, their volunteers support, and their staff for welcoming everyone into the clinic. Approximately 750 were vaccinated in the June 10th clinic, and another 750 people are scheduled to be vaccinated this week at the West Cass Complex. More clinics will be held in Wingham on July 8th and 22nd, and it is likely more clinics will be held in August. The case numbers are trending downward, and I want to thank the community, especially the local business community, for the cooperation in helping dealing with the pandemic. However, the pandemic is not over, and as we reopen our doors to welcome shoppers, we would ask that everyone continue to follow public health measures such as wearing a mask, maintaining 2 meters physical distance, washing your hands, sanitizing, and limiting the size of gatherings and capacities. I also encourage everyone who has not had the first dose to get registered online and call the Huron Public Health Unit app 1-833-753-2098. For those who have any questions or concerns about the vaccine, I strongly encourage you to contact Huron Public Health and have your questions answered properly by the people that know what they're talking about. For members of the Abbotsford community who have traveled by horse and buggy into our towns, I encourage you to speak to the public health. We very much appreciate your support, our local business, and we want everybody to stay safe. I have reached out to Jamie Heffer one more time and asked if him and Morris Turnbury will get involved. I am inviting them to help us because it's all of our citizens. We all need to stay safe together. Thank you. Going to go to council member reports, and this one will be on city boards or committees. Not too sure many boards or can anybody go ahead, Anita? Go ahead, Anita.
The thank you, Reeve Bailey. The Physicians Recruitment Committee had a quarterly meeting. They had a joint meeting with Listowel. Meeting went well. Dr. Sheffield is retired May the 1st. High-risk patients were transferred to other doctors and locums, and the nurse practitioner see the other patients that are not really at high risk. There is a very promising candidate in the in view, and we're just waiting on the decision about that. Teeswater is in the works of getting a new clinic and maybe eventually a new doctor. The Lucknow clinic is doing very well with 2 new doctors there, and the community served there pretty good. Jan McCaig, the physicians recruitment person, is doing for both hospitals now, and it is absolutely an advantage for the North Huron community as well. And I think that's it for me. Thank you.
BIA members, is there anything going on? Paul, you had your hand up. You're muted. Good.
Is just for the Alice Munro Festival of Short Stories. It went very, very well on the June 4th weekend. And on the Friday, they did the schools, and they had over 1,100 children involved, and they're very happy with that. And the authors talked about that to the moderators and said how well it really went through smoothly. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead, Kevin.
Just through the Blythe BIA, we're happy to announce that we had a store opening this week. We're glad that the town of Wingham has graciously offered to share the sweets that they have up on top of the hill up there for Sweets and Treats opened up this weekend. So we're happy to see lots of happy dentists in the area with probably assuming two more. I do have a question concerning the BIA, and this is probably through you, Reeve, to Dwayne or to Carson. With the delay in the presenting the BIA's minutes to the township, should there be a delay in me bringing that information forward? I just don't want to bring out something that maybe the count of the staff is not aware of yet, because they haven't gotten the minutes yet. So
through your worship, to answer Councillor Falconer's question, no, that is certainly your role as the council representative to bring those things forward in a timely manner. We as staff, we don't usually rely on the minutes for stuff coming from the BIA. So if there's a motion or something coming out, usually the chair or the recording secretary of the BIA will reach out to myself or Blaine or the relevant department head.
okay, no, I'll just hold it at that then. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, comments by members. Anything going on that, go ahead, Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Reeve. This is just a happy thing. My arm is just waiting for July 8th. I was one of the last to get a spot in there, and this is my second shot. I'm older than most of you, I think, so getting a second is kind of important. So anyway, it was good news for me.
Good for you. Good for you. Yes, it's a little difficult to get in there because we're rolling them through pretty fast. Okay, not seeing anyone else. Notice of motion, we don't have any. Bylaws. Bylaw number 11.1 being a bylaw 50-2021 memorandum of agreement with Simply Voting Inc. for online voting system services. Do I have a mover? I have Chris moving. I have Paul seconding. Over to you, Carson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion on the floor is that bylaw number 50/2021, being a bylaw of the Township of North Huron, to authorize the Reeve clerk to sign on behalf of council a memorandum of agreement between the Corporation of the Township of North Huron and Simply Voting Inc. for online voting system services, be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, be signed by the Reeve clerk, and be engrossed in the bylaw book. So Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Bylaw 11.2, bylaw number 51-2021, adoption of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. Do I have a mover? Kevin Faulkner moves. Do I have a seconder? Anita Van Hindersum seconds. When you're ready, Carson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion on the floor is that bylaw number 51/2021, being a bylaw to establish a community safety and well-being plan for the Corporation of the Township of North Huron, be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, be signed by the Reeve clerk, and be engrossed in the bylaw book. So Deputy Reeve Sight,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Announcements. The next regular council meeting will be held on Monday, July 5th, 2021 at 6 p.m. through electronic participation. The next Economic Development Committee Recovery Team will be held on Thursday, July 15th, 2021 at 2 p.m. through electronic participation. The next BIA board meeting will be held on Thursday, August 19th, 2021 at 6:30 through electronic participation. And the next live BIA board meeting will be held on Thursday, August 26th, 2021 at 8 a.m. through electronic participation. Other business. Anybody else have any other business? Not seeing any. Closed session. We do not have closed session tonight. Confirmation of the bylaw. That the bylaw number 52/2021 being a bylaw to adopt, confirm, and ratify matters dealt with by the Council of the Township of North Huron at the June 21st, 2021 meeting be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, be signed by the Reeve and clerk and engrossed in the bylaw book. Do I have a mover? I have Paul moving. Do I have a seconder? I have Rick seconding. Carson?
Thank you, Your Worship. So Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight,
Staying due to the conflict.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Adjournment that the Council of Township of North Huron agrees there being no further business before council. The meeting hereby adjourns at 9:05 p.m. Do I have a mover? Do I have a mover? Where do you want to go? Kevin Faulkner moves. Paul Heffer seconds. You guys. You guys just know I'm tired, so you want to keep me here, don't you? Go ahead, Carson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
I guess so. I do like it here, though.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sipe,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Stay safe, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.